context of talking about uh, power and danger with herbs that we kind of were briefly getting into. I think that language is very interesting. Sometimes it can be slippery. When I said that I saw Eleuthero as dangerous, uh, I would say it's dangerous in instances of people who have a history of mania. It's not dangerous in the way that digitalis is dangerous. And then we're talking about lobelia making people hitting the nausea receptors in the brain with lobelia inflata. I don't think that lobelia inflata is a dangerous herb at all if the dose is small. It's not to do with toxicity, you know. Whereas Artemisia annua, I've got a little bunch of it over there. In my opinion, a little dangerous with that one. And that one's gotten really, really popular the last few years. One, for good reason, and I think second, for not so good reason. One, that it smells really, really amazing, and you can make nice Artemisia annua pillows. Two, that people think it's a good intervention for SARS-CoV-2, which I don't think it does anything for, because they thought, oh, well, okay, hydroxychloroquine, so any malaria intervention is going to work against a viral infection that has no physiological mirror within the body whatsoever. Artemisia annua can help a lot with babesia, I think, which is still a big problem of infection. It's one of the co-infections with the tick bite. It's actually a lot worse than the Lyme Borrelia bacteria. Babesia is the cousin of malaria. It likes to swim around in the blood, destroy red blood cells, make the spleen enlarge, make the heart enlarged, and then when it has a little bit of kickback, it also really likes to go into the central nervous system and the brain. So Artemisia annua has its place, but that place would be like 10 drops for 10 days and then backed off entirely. So
absolutely. I like to say it's a powerful medicine. It's not an overall health promoting type of herb, right? But for specific applications. It's one of those things that we can use to sort of demonstrate herbs do stuff, for the perhaps skeptics, and but not an overall health promoting herb. Yeah, but it looks like we have Paul too.
Yeah.
Hey,
welcome, Paul.
Thanks, and nice to see you. Nice to meet you in person, Michelle.
In person.
And Heather.
Digital. Lots
and everyone.
Lots and lots of zeros and ones. Mm-hmm. How are you doing this morning?
Doing pretty well. It's a bright morning. Snowing in Portland, Oregon. So
it's currently still snowing?
It is, yes.
Wow. The whole West got dumped on this last week or two.
Yeah, they collected all the February winter snow from the entire country and they put it on California and Oregon.
It's serious, you guys. I was in Mammoth a month ago and the entire cinema was swallowed in snow. I've never seen anything like it.
Oh my gosh.
Like the whole building. I've never seen, even in all of my Chicago days with snowbanks 15 feet high, I've never seen this.
Wow. Robin, would you like to say hello real quick? And Marlon too, for our new friends here. And then we'll let Paul take it away.
Hi, I'm Robin. I'm in so-called Nashville, and I'm a community herbalist here. I'm excited to be here. I'm also here because Michelle invited me, and I've been really looking forward to it. But today's the first day I've been able to get here, but I'm excited to stick around for most of the day and be here and learn from y'all and all the things. And I'm painting, so I thought it might be distracting, so that's why my video is off.
I'm kind of into this craft circle we have going on in the background. You can feel free to leave it on. Okay. I'm actually working on a baby boy.
And I'm crocheting, so handiwork welcome here.
I'm fine-tuning some of the stuff I may present today, and I noticed about 4 or 5 of us are drinking coffee, so it's early in some parts of the country.
Here's mine.
Yeah, we've been spending the last couple of days just having really long intro sessions, hanging out in the morning, so it's kind of nice.
Would you like to say hello real quick, Marlon?
Hey, yeah, my name's Marlon. I'm coming in, or joining from Vancouver Island, BC, Canada. I'm pretty low energy today, so I'm just chilling in bed, and we'll probably have my cam off while I'm just, in my bed zone. But hopefully we'll be able to join in a little more throughout the day, and I'm just looking forward to hearing some more conversation and learning, and yeah, it's been great this weekend so far, so looking forward to more of that.
Cool, thank you.
So
Okay.
I'm not quite ready. I'll be ready in about 3 minutes here.
Okay.
Take your time.
I've put a PDF of the slides for the show in the chat box there. So people could download them.
Awesome. Yeah, and if there's any newcomers, I have been promoting the idea that we either shout your location or put it next to your name if you feel comfortable. We're not encouraging you to reveal your location if it's not a comfortable thing. But just given the sense of place talks that we've been having, I'd love to know where everyone's located and expand my imaginary map of all of us beaming back and forth in real space. And I want to share a little bit about the place where I am this morning and how I went out on a trail near the Bolinas Lagoon, which I'm near the Point Reyes National Seashore in California. And this morning I was 20 minutes south. We're actually an hour north of San Francisco, but this morning I was 20 minutes south of here, and I collected a little bit of Claytonia, which is a plant. I'm going to try to find a picture for you guys. Its common name is miner's lettuce. So Claytonia perfoliata.
Yum.
And it's related to, I think it's related to shepherd's purse. But that was my breakfast. So I just wanted to share something about the place and plants this morning.
Thank you. And Heather, when I was talking about Artemisia annua for SARS-CoV-2, and that I don't think it's contributing whatsoever. It was just kind of foolish thinking, ooh, malaria stuff. I took it, and I'd say even that 10 drops for 10 days, when I had SARS-CoV-2, too much. It felt like my brain was swollen in my skull. A very, very uncomfortable feeling too. Well, especially when you're...
It's abrasive. It's abrasive. I think I included it yesterday as it just was like a sort of a model of one type, a plant that we may know associated with one type of constituent. But I do definitely consider it abrasive. And also with the whole COVID thing, I mean, now we're a few years into it, but my initial impressions in the first several months, especially a couple of weeks of people, trying to come up with an herbal solution was, we can't know these things yet, right? We can't know these things, right? Just because we know symptoms or other diseases that certain plants have been used for. It's just such a newer disease than anything anyone has dealt with in our lifetime so far still. But now some people do have a good amount of experience, but I think there were a lot of things touted or pitched early on that to me were just not quite sure if we know that yet.
We'll keep his name but like he had interesting takes about the nature, and his books are good, but somebody thought he had 50 exotic, hard to find herbs that you could just take all together, and it's just magically going to do all these things that we don't even have any sense yet for the physiological pathology of. And
Yeah.
that cocktail, those protocols, nothing in there about just treating a cough, so, but
yeah, it's incredible to me that the herb learners, let's say, sometimes are in alarm that they might hurt someone with calendula or chamomile, yet the next leap is to do like a super super nauseating protocol layered with 10 or 20 very strong herbs. So just always stay grounded in context, people, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'd like to comment with one of my favorite quotes. 800 AD in Baghdad, right? To practice medicine in the marketplace, you had to pass medical exams. You had to have apprenticed with somebody, and your practice was observed, right, before you could practice. But then they had examiners who were constantly examining to see what the doctors were doing. And they had a rule. If anyone was found to have given a strong herb when a mild herb would do, or give an herb when a dietary change was warranted, or give a dietary change when simple lifestyle advice would have sufficed, he'd be disqualified from practicing medicine.
Yeah. That's in the Hippocratic Oath too. No medical nihilism.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And they had those rules because they observed. We're trying to find the right herb for this person, but if it's very, very harsh, if we're a little bit off, it's going to screw them up. And that's why they have the above all do no harm. Yeah. And I like to emphasize the word there is all, A-L-L, right? So anyway, I appreciate what I hear you guys saying, because what I'm hearing there is critical thinking, right? This is what I'm critical thinking. So my talk today is urban legends and clinical pearls. Okay. And I can tell you, how this started. I have a unique education in many directions. Number one, I did 1.5 years of a naturopathic medical school. I had basic medical sciences. I was a pre-med major, a really super smart chemistry and psychology major and all of that. And I can do the science thing really well. And not only that, I was already out there doing the science thing on my own. And I had a mentor, Dr. Steve Austin, a naturopathic nutrition expert. And at that point, he had spent the previous 20 years every Monday going to a medical library and seeing what was new in the literature of clinical nutrition. And then quarterly, he would do an update. Here are the studies that might change the way you practice, right? Not the latest animal trial or the latest lab district. No, these are the human trials that might change the way you practice. And so I published that for him for 4 years, right? He had this master level of critical thinking, like how to dissect scientific fraud, how to dissect rigged scientific trials. And I got really, really advanced mentoring in how to critique science, right? Okay, now that's one way of knowing things, okay, the science. But on the other hand, we talk about, we have intuition and plant spirit medicine and things. And I've been a naturalist. From an early age, I had a lot of trauma, and I grew up near some woods, and I spent a lot of time in nature growing up. And then as an adult in my midlife, I spent thousands of hours alone in wilderness or alone in natural areas, alone studying the natural rhythms and the ecologies there. So this is like this one kind of education, and this is another kind of education is hands-on there. And then I'm going to add to that ever since 1996, I've been supervising teaching clinics at herb schools. And this is where the students, they basically graduate with an advanced herbal degree, and then they work in a public clinic. And I get to review and read their cases. They would write up their cases, then I would review the case and give them feedback on it. But I would get to see, I got vicarious clinical experience from, we've now graduated more than 400 people from those clinics, and most of them have between 8 and 12 months of practice in the clinic. And since 1996, I have read almost every single case that came through 2 teaching clinics like that. And what it means vicariously, I got to see all the follow-ups. I got to see what works and what doesn't. Right? So this is these are different ways of knowing things. And but I'm explaining this. I'm not puffing myself up. This is where I got the perspective for what I'm teaching today. Right? Is that in the 80s, I started practicing in 1973 dietetics. I'm in my 50th year, and when we saw, at least in the Anglo hippie community, we saw herbalism resurrected, and in the 80s, and I could say in 1986 there was one herbal conference in the country, right, and there were 3 small schools in the whole country. I emphasize in the Anglo community because there have always been, or not even Anglo, I mean, there've been Southern herbalists, African American herbalists, Puerto Rican herbalists, herbalists in LA, and everywhere, Mexican herbalists, Southwest herbalism, that's always been there. So I'm not suggesting that this stream is the essence of herbalism, but I went to the one conference I went, and there were 80 people there, and they had come from all over the West Coast and a few people from the East Coast, and that's a pretty small movement. And what we see today, there are too many schools to count. There are too many conferences to count. There are too many classes like this to count. There are too many people like your teachers here to count. And that we see this whole thing has become, it's not even a lineage. It's a movement. It's a movement. It has jumped any bounds. It's feral, and nature is bringing it forward the way it is. So, but in those days, we learned a lot of things, right, that we thought were true, right? And I am not a negative thinker. I'm not going, man, it's probably not true. Herbs don't work. No, I don't do that. I mean, I love herbs. I'm using herbs all the time, but I have an open, inquisitive, and critical thinking mind. And as the 80s, the 90s go on, I say, oh, we thought that was true. That's not true, right? And some of those things that I figured out wasn't true 30 years ago are still being taught in every herb book that gets published in the country, right? So what we have is I call it the urban legend, HERBN legend, like something, it has no basis in reality. And so many of these, I saw these as they were evolving. I'm going to show you in here, there's an urban legend about echinacea, that echinacea loses its effect after 10 days. You have to stop taking it. And I remember when that came, I know who did it. I'm much too polite and dignified to criticize people who made a mistake, who were trying to do good work. But there was a trial published. I'll show you this in the slides, where they gave people echinacea and measured their white blood cells, right? And there's a graph. I'll show you the graph. The white blood cell activity goes up. It peaks at day 5 and then gradually declines down and is back toward baseline at day 10. And so it was written in the German language, right? So the one herbalist who thought he knew German wasn't actually able to read the article, and he also wasn't able to interpret a chart. The chart had little arrows at the bottom for each dose, and they gave the echinacea for 5 days. So this, now you see this in magazine articles and books and things. Oh, echinacea, you might as well stop taking it at 10 days because it stopped having an effect. And somebody didn't notice that they stopped giving echinacea at day 5, and it was still having an effect at day 10, right? So I'm just saying, that was the seed, the root of an urban legend, right? And so I've studied because I've been constantly teaching now since about 1989, and I really want to teach accurate materials. So I practice critical thinking, and so I try to teach students. So my estimate, this is an urban legend, my estimate is about 40% of what is taken as common knowledge in North American herbalism at this point is urban legend. And for many of those, we can trace them back to where it started, what mistake was made to make that happen. So the class here, you'll get some useful information. Let me finish. So for a while, I was studying. I have a draft of a book, Urban Legends and Clinical Pearls, and was studying that, and it was urban legends. And then I realized, well, if I publish that book, people would just say, "Oh, he's just some old fuddy-duddy. He doesn't know what he's talking about." And what I realized is, for most of these herbs, like for echinacea is really, really useful in some situations, right? So you can say, well, this is the legend about echinacea. This is what it's useful for. Or we'll also look at wild yam. People will say, oh, wild yam. No, wild yam has no hormonal effects at all in the human body. It does not affect female hormones. It doesn't affect adrenal hormones or whatever. And so a lot of people believe that. You'll find that in almost every women's herbal, that wild yam will help balance hormones. And so I say, okay, but what is actually wild yam is our absolutely very best smooth muscle antispasmodic. It's been used that way in all schools of medicine for hundreds of years, like for spasm of gallbladder, right, or for colic or for menstrual cramps. And so that's the clinical pearl. Oh, wild yam, that's in one of my top 10 herbs. It's a very reliable, smooth muscle antispasmodic. So you can put that in your little pearl bag and pull it out the next time somebody has crampy muscles. So it's urban legends and clinical pearls. But what I'd like you, I'm going to teach some useful things, right, to unlearn some things and some clinical pearls. But really what I want you to see is the process, is learn how to think critically, right? And okay, and so I think I would like to run the slides.
I just made you host, so that
perfect.
Should be able to share screen.
All right, just what I was hoping for. Okay, just 1 second. I'm gonna rearrange my array here. Okay. Here, I see the share screen. Just a minute. Here we are. Three. All right. It's done there. Okay. Urban Legends and Clinical Pearls. These are notes from a conference where I taught this some time ago, but you can have them. That address is correct, but this is all that's all out of date, actually. Okay. So what is an urban legend? Okay. Something's wrong here. This thing at the top is distracting. There you go. Urban legend, a persistent, widely and firmly held belief about a plant and its medicinal effects, which isn't true. Okay. It's passed from textbook to textbook, from teacher to student, and perpetuated across generations based on students' faith in their teachers, their textbooks, and their misinterpretation of science, tradition, and subjective experience. Okay. Here. Why? Okay. General lack of critical thinking in modern society. There's nothing that the pandemic proved for us more than that, or the Trump era proved us more than that. There's a general lack of ability to think critically in our society, and this affects the understanding of herbalism. It isn't like herbalists, because we're good and on the side of the nature, suddenly have critical thinking ability. So, okay. And this is the big elephant in the room, is the influence of the natural products industry. This is marketing. What we aspire to as herbalists is we want to find the best herb for this patient, right? And we want to look at lifestyle, diet, nutrition, etc., and not just give this for that herb. Okay. But the motivation of natural products industry is to sell things, take this for that, right? So and then what the natural products industry will do, this is propaganda in general, they'll write something true about it and they'll omit everything that's contradictory to the marketing plan. And so this is I in the 1980s I was hired by 2 companies. I did this for about a year and a half to write educational materials for their herbal products, right? And I could tell you what I would do. I would, here's this herb, and there's these 5 studies. I'd have 5 paragraphs. These 2 were positive, this one was neutral, and this one was negative, and this one showed it had side effects. So I'd turn that over to the company owner, and he'd have it like this with a big red marker, and he'd X out anything that showed that it didn't work or that it might be dangerous, right? And then he published the article, and it would only be the things that made it look good. And you just be aware, almost anything you get through a company comes through that filter and has that spin on it, and is very misleading. And then the other piece of this is the corruption of alternative health media. I wrote back in the 80s, I wrote something more than 120 magazine articles and columns for like Natural Health magazine and stuff like that about herbs. And I realized what was going on completely when I got a call from an editor one day, and they said, can you think of an article you could write that Nature's Way would like to take out a full place ad to put next to the article? This is what you do. You'll see the article and then, oh, why, look, there's an ad there in the magazine. This is all through the health media. They do that. And so they hire writers to write spin articles. And in 1989, I started publishing a medical herbalism journal so I could have a medium somewhere where I could just tell the truth, right? Because none of the magazines would accept the truth. And so it was all marketing hype. Okay. So think critically. Am I educating you? Were you aware of that? They hire people to write books, right? I forgot which one it was. Yeah, rhodiola. They hired somebody to write a book. It's called The Rhodiola Revolution. You think that might be a pro-rhodiola book, right? And but they hired him, and I knew a guy back in the 90s. They would hire him serially. He'd write an article about maca. He'd write a small book about maca, and then a small book about something else or whatever. And his name was on them. They were all marketing hypes. So, okay. Here I say I won't go deep into this exactly for this group, but lack of functional scientific literacy. I heard you were talking earlier about the person who advocates all these heavy, harsh herbs for COVID, right? Now that person based all that on lab dish studies, right? Like this herb will inhibit viral replication, in a lab dish, right? Well, a lab dish doesn't have a liver or a digestive tract or a liver detoxifying system, right? You take something through your mouth, it passes through your digestion and your liver. There may be nothing left by the time it gets to your liver. And so this is true of almost the one prominent person who wrote antiviral herbs, right, and all these harsh herbs. Almost every single one of those herbs does not work in human beings, and it only worked in lab dishes. So we have the idea in literacy, you need to be aware of this with your authors. Somebody can be literate and know how to read, right? And get out of school and all that. But we have the term functional literacy. A person can read the words, but then they can deal with some complex topics and do that. And we have the same thing in science. We have people who know some scientific terminology, and this is medical doctors, right? They may know some scientific terminology, and they may know how to read a scientific study, but they are not functionally scientifically literate. Like anyone who says something based on a lab dish study will apply clinically, that person is scientifically, functionally illiterate. right? And many of our herbalists today who have reputation, this is a scientific herbalist, they're completely scientifically illiterate. This is, and I guess that, anyway, just so you understand, they don't know how to take it to the level of critical thinking about what applies in the clinic. The big mistakes people make, they take a lab dish study and interpret it as clinical, right? They they take a study of constituents and translate that to the plant. Many times those constituents are injected into mouse peritoneal cavities. So they'll do that, and then they'll say, okay, well, this herb will do that if you take it by mouth, right? It's preposterous, actually. And then this is, we do have herbalists, they wear the badge. I'm a scientific herbalist, right? And just be very, very, very careful about that. The problem is most people don't have enough scientific education to know where these people are actually not being scientific. Okay. This is a big deal, romanticization and idealization of the past. I call them pseudo-folk traditions, superficial ethnobotany, and herbal medical traditions. The romanticization, you go back and, oh man, back Culpeper was a great master herbalist. Culpeper had 8 children, and only 7 of them made it to adulthood, right? And those herbs were not magic bullets, right? They weren't suddenly, and people were not suddenly in this Garden of Eden. This book, Back to Eden, it's one of the early books. We came back to Eden, back to hunter-gatherer times when everybody was healthy. Everybody was healthy. They all ate organic fruit and vegetables and meat, and they had lots of omega-3 fatty acids and vitamin D and right, and didn't live in crowded into cesspools, living in cities in their own poop, and they were healthy in a different way, but it wasn't. There was no herbal nirvana or Eden in our past. The average life expectancy of a Western European from the time of 0 BC up until about 1900, the average lifespan was 25 years. Okay. And the average lifespan of a hunter-gatherer was 35 years. Right? And I will say, before you jump on those things, everybody didn't die at 25 or 35. There was a 30% infant mortality rate, or a 20% infant mortality rate. So there've always been gray-haired elders around, but a high infant mortality rate, you end up with an average life expectancy down there low. Okay. But so there's no, there was, in Culpeper's time, Culpeper learned his herbalism from his mother. His mother was an herbalist. And at that time, diarrheal diseases were major killers. And sometimes an epidemic would come through and 10% of the population would die of a diarrheal disease, despite them having sophisticated herbal traditions. So we don't want to romanticize the past that way. Okay. This is the one thing. The human being has a cognitive flaw. The human being has a cognitive flaw. Is they'll refer to an authority and they completely turn their brain off, right? Oh, I like this guy's books. Okay, I now believe every single thing that comes from that guy's books. Right? I've written a bunch of books. I'd rewrite every one of them if I had a chance, right? I'd correct the errors that I put into them if I had a chance, right? I'm not a total authority. Right. And I actually fight this in myself as a teacher. I tell my students, you do not have to believe what I believe, but I will explain to you why I believe what I believe. Right. And then no, don't accept me as an authority. I'll explain to you why I believe what I believe. And then in our classes are all about, we pass around this herb, everybody take it. Now, what do you think that herb does? Right? I'm not going to say, oh, this herb does da 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 da, talking heads, nodding heads, people trying to scribble down notes, right? And then they can't read them 5 years later, right? I pass around, everybody takes some peony root, and they go, oh my gosh, I feel relaxed, and I feel da da da. I feel like my mother just came in the room and gave me a hug, And so we teach this. You need, and this is advice for everyone younger than the age of 70, okay? I'm 75 now, and I did a lecture series called "How to Become a Master Herbalist in 50 Years or More." right? Because people offer, become a master herbalist in 3 weeks, and you pay your money and you get your certificate. No, you want this to be your life, and you accumulate stuff. So the motto is take an herb every single day. Take an herb a day and read an herb a day. Right? And there's stories that go with that. I can't go further into that right now, but you've heard of Bastyr University. John Bastyr, who that was named after, he practiced for more than 60 years. And in medical school, he adopted the practice of reading one materia medica item every night before he went to sleep. And he did that for 60 years. So if you would like to have a university named after you in 40 or 50 years, right, constantly read and reread materia medica. And the other one is constantly every day do a blind proving of an herb. Go to your tincture shelf, close your eyes, take something off, put it in your mouth. Say, what does this herb do? Right? And you can even feel your pulse first and then take it. What does this do? What does this do to my pulse? Right? So you end up with an intellectual materia medica, and you end up with an organoleptic materia medica. And your organoleptic materia medica should be equal or exceed your intellectual materia medica. That you know these herbs, your body knows these herbs and what they do. Okay. So that is your defense against authorities. Okay. I made my students read 4 different sources to do their herb journaling, many of which would contradict each other. Yeah, this is their first week in herb school. And they'll go, but Paul, David Winston disagrees with Michael Moore. And I'd say, okay, class, welcome to the world of 21st century herbalism. It was 20th century when I said that. This is it. This is what's going on here. So how are you going to answer that question? And I had them all like Pavlov's dogs. I said, how are we going to answer that? And everyone would answer in one voice, try some. Right? All right. I could not give the rest of this lecture, and you all would have gotten your money's worth from that, and do that for the next 40 years, and they might name a university after you, or at least you are going to take what came from the past. You're going to apply it in the present. You're going to improve it. You're going to adapt it to circumstances and the kind of conditions people have now, and you're going to pass that on to future generations. And that will be a worthy thing to have done with a life. Okay. This is also a problem. There was a vacuum of hands-on experience in the later 20th and early 21st centuries. We really did not have clinical herbal education in the U.S. More than about 6 or 8 students a year until the 1990s, 1991, right? And right now there's lots of schools that have a teaching clinic, right? So, but a lot of stuff was adopted in this era when nobody actually had clinical training. The herbalist was a famous herbalist speaking at conferences, and they were all about plant walks and tincture making, right? And they actually hadn't seen a patient in 10 years, right? So that's where some of this came from. And this is rapidly corrected in your generation because there's a lot more experience happening. Okay. I talked a little bit about this. This is critical thinking from 4 directions. This is how do you know what's true, right? Okay, well, you study how things were done in the past. You study the herbal traditions, okay? In the South, you get all the practical experience you can, right? And study follow-up cases. What's new coming in from science about our traditional herbs, and then our intuition and instinct, right? And I consider all 4 of those equally powerful and equally valid ways of knowing. But the problem is you need critical thinking special for each direction. Something's in an old book. Okay, well, is that old book copied from another old book, copied from another old book, copied from another old book by somebody who never actually saw it work, right? Was that in 1890 when everybody ate nothing but organic meat and vegetables, right? And so rather than in 1990 when the foods are all completely minerally devalued, So, okay, South, we have experience is good, but misinterpretation of experience is common. We have, if you just set up a shop on the corner and you had a stream of people coming in and you gave them some herbs and went out the other side, 75% of them would get better from the placebo effect without any influence of the herb at all. And then you would pat yourself on the back and say, wow, I'm quite a special fellow. 75% of my patients get better. And you're stealing credit from the Great Mother, right, is what you're stealing at that point. Because the Great Mother is making 75% of people better regardless of what you do. So, okay. And intuition, you can have intuition and instinct, but you also need you need to question and criticize your intuitive insights, right? I like to say critical thinking means I have this thought and this belief and I question it, right? And I look for an answer. So here I have an intuitive impression and then I ask myself now, let's see, is that really true? How does that feel? Is that really true? Or is this some ego-pleasing thing that from my unconscious mind who wants to tell me I'm the most brilliant psychic in the world, you know? So, you need critical thinking in each direction. That science, you need really specialized advanced education in order to be able to critique a science. And most people can't do that, so there's just by knee jerk, they just reject science. And probably that would be a better approach than just believing anything science. Just disbelieve it, but you can learn critical thinking in that direction, and that can benefit. So, this at our school, we structure our curriculum around educating people in all four directions, educating people with their intuition and instinct and clinical training, study the old books, and then bring in what's new from science that's useful. Okay. So I will. We started out. Somebody talked about using a harsh herb for COVID, right? And here's an example. The plant is Lomatium dissectum. This is a plant out in the West, and here's the history of this. During the Great Influenza Epidemic, 1918, a physician in Lake Tahoe noticed that although mortality was high among the whites, he was unaware of any mortality among the local Washoe tribe. Okay. And the same was observed for whites who used the methods of the Washoe. Okay. So, and there you can actually, I put a link there. You can actually go download that guy's monograph he wrote on Lomatium. He wrote down there, the chief medicine was a long decoction of Lomatium dissectum. They have a great big pot with gallons of water in it, and they put a couple of pounds of Lomatium in there and boil this stuff for hours. And as scum rises to the top, they scoop the scum off the top as it rises to the top. And then people would drink large doses of that, right? The per day dose was 6 ounces of the root a day. Okay. And in that group's use, this is a respiratory medicine, useful for respiratory tract things. If you, but just notice, large dose, water extract, some components removed. Okay, this is the ethnobotanical basis of saying that Lomatium dissectum is, quote, antiviral. All right, here we go. Lomatium is a tincture entered into naturopathic practice by Dr. Bastyr as a respiratory herb. During the 1980s, it was popularized as a, quote, antiviral. And somebody said, oh, because the Native American people who took gallons of Lomatium tea, right, did not die of influenza, it must be antiviral, right? It must have some effect against influenza virus, right? I'd like to note, maybe it has no effect on the virus at all. It just promotes expectoration, right? Expectoration itself is an immune response. So, okay. Anyway, I witnessed this. I worked for a company that sold this product in the 80s. And as soon as it started being popularized, the phenomenon of the Lomatium rash was seen in many people using it, right? And let's see, the company where I was, we got about 50 case reports of that. and I got to witness some of those. Students at the Naturopathic College took this. You can you get it. Here's some pictures. That's the lomatium rash. This goes. Here's the lomatium root, right? A big lomatium root. This is actually Henrietta Kress. She's if you should look her up. Her sites are one of the best educational sites on the internet. She's German. She lives in Finland. She was at Michael Moore's school, and she took a small amount of lomatium as 1/5 part of an herbal formula, and she got the dreaded lomatium rash. And so she took this picture and posted it on her website. This is another one. That's what it looks like. You take lomatium. You can take even modest amounts of the tincture. You get the rash. It covers your whole body. The little bald spot on the top of your head, the bottom of your feet, and everywhere in between gets a rash on it. And the phenomenon is a non-painful, non-itchy rash. But then you go to that's very scary. So you go to the emergency room. They give you some steroids and it doesn't go away. And they go, oh my God, we have no idea what this is. So they admit you to the hospital, right? And then you're in the hospital and you stop taking the lomatium. So the rash goes away and they say, we wonder what that was. Okay. This happened repeatedly. People ended up in the hospital with a scary rash. So this is, here, there you go. The rash is induced by constituents of the plant. So around this, the urban legend emerged. Oh, that rash, that's the Herxheimer reaction. That's your candida dying off is causing the rash, right? And here you compounded the lomatium urban legend on top of the candida urban legend. There are constituents in the parsley family, in the carrot family that cause rashes, right? It's common in this family. So, okay. There was a trial. This is a trial. There's the reference in British Columbia, and they took these viruses in viral culture, and they selected these viruses are really, really diverse. They many of them don't even resemble each other really at all. And so they took a wide variety of kinds of viruses, and they put them in lab dishes, and they screened 100 British Columbia medicinal plants to see if any of them had direct antiviral effects against virus in a lab dish. And there they were. Lomatium inhibited the para-influenza virus. That's not influenza. It was ineffective against the other 6, including a virus characteristic of the influenza viral family. And so here we have, not only in your mouth, even in the lab dish, lomatium is not antiviral. This was invented, the urban legend was misinterpreting, because people who took lomatium and the whole package of Native American treatment for influenza didn't die, right? That's the misinterpretation. So therefore, the lomatium must have killed the influenza virus, right? Right. So that's the lack of critical thinking. That little seed, the entire urban legend grew up from that. And then, of course, nobody noticed that actually in a lab dish, it doesn't do anything to 6 out of 7. I think 6 out of 7 viruses there. Okay. Okay. We have pearls, clinical pearls. Okay. Lomatium is a warming expectorant, right? Expectoration itself has general antiviral effects, right? When you first come down with a cold and you have this running tap water, that drip, 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 that thin, clear mucus, that has all the immune components that are present in mother's milk that give immunity to a baby, right? You're bathing, and as long as that's flowing, this is the river of life, right? The mother is sending you blessings that the river of life, this immune component are flowing there. It's mechanically washing out infection, and it's full of antibodies that will tag and eliminate the viral thing. So the adage in natural medicine is keep the mucous membranes moist, right? Hydrate and expectorants. Key medicines throughout the entire history of medicine, expectorants, keep the mucous membranes moist in acute illness, right? So lomatium will do this, okay? This urban legend, I saw a misapplication of it. This is one of the ones people are giving. This is, it's a harsh herb, and it can cause the rashes. And this is widespread in the COVID pandemic on the basis of certain writings, that here we're going to, take Lomation. Oh, Lomation will cure long COVID. Lomation will do whatever. And it's harsh. Now, there's a disease, West Nile virus. A lot of people aren't too familiar with that. It's a mosquito-borne virus. You get West Nile fever. This entered the United States around 2001 from Africa. It's carried by mosquitoes, and its reservoir vector is the bird population. Right. And so we watched 2001. Oh, there's some cases in New York City, right? 2002. Oh my gosh, it's over to Ohio. 2003. Oh my gosh, it got to the Mississippi River. And there's this epidemic of people getting West Nile virus, right? And which is similar. We would say it was similar. It's related to dengue fever, right? So you get a fever and a rash, and it infects the central nervous system. And 1% of people develop meningitis and so on. So in 2003, I was practicing in Boulder, Colorado. They had a late snow there, and the entire Front Range turned into a swamp at exactly the time that the West Nile mosquitoes bloomed, right? And the state health department estimated that 250,000 Coloradans got West Nile fever that year. And so I did myself. In our school community, 10% of our school community got West Nile fever. So I got to, and this was similar to say, well, here's COVID. How do we treat this? So the herbalists were all going, oh, here's West Nile. How do we treat this? So people stacked up all the antiviral urban legends, right? They put them in a formula. They're going to put lomatium in there, and they're going to put licorice in there, and but Melissa in there, and they're all antiviral urban legends, right? And of course, this is a self-limiting illness for most people, but we never saw that do any good for anybody. I don't think we're going to talk about bone set. I actually used bone set, which is what they used for. They used to call these mosquito-borne illnesses. They used to call them autumnal fevers, because the mosquitoes would bloom in August and September, and people would get them. So dengue fever and chikungunya and some other ones. So we tried that. That was useful. But lomatium didn't do anything for anybody with West Nile encephalitis. I treated some cases of meningitis and encephalitis. Didn't do anything for them. Right. The standard old treatments of relaxing diaphoretics and bone set did a lot of good for that. This is the way those illnesses were treated before. So they're doing this now. They said, oh, okay, well, it's a virus. We'll give them lomatium. They're doing this now with COVID, and it won't do anything for COVID. Now, I have to say, there's a clinical pearl. It's a warming expectorant, right? And also, it's aromatic. And when you take it, I get the sense when I take it that some of those aromatic things are being excreted through the lungs. I get a sense there. So it's possible, entirely possible, and even likely, because they use this for bacterial pneumonia, they use it for respiratory things, that it's expectorant, and it's possible those warming constituents enhance immunity as they come directly in contact with the lung tissue. Right? So this is the clinical pearl. You need maybe 10 drops of it to do that, right? Maybe 10 drops to do that. Okay. Okay. All right. Pearl. This is almost a case study in all the ways that people go bad with an urban legend. Misinterpretation of ethnobotany, ignoring the method of preparation in the traditional use, right? Ignorance of the methods used to reduce adverse effects. Right, scientific illiteracy, interpreting a pharmacological action from a clinical effect, right, and propagation by authorities, books, and natural product industry, and then blind acceptance of authorities. And then people, I'm telling you, on social media, people are swearing, but oh man, that lomatium helped my COVID. It really did a job, and most COVID goes away on its own for most people. So okay. Y'all have heard of, y'all are around Chicago, is that right? I guess people on the Zoom are from everywhere. So Opal Panax, Devil's Club, people have heard of Devil's Club? The urban legend of Devil's Club is that Devil's Club is anti-diabetic, right? And that it was an ethnobotanical magic bullet for diabetes. And I like to say that this is it. The urban legend is that, Devil's Club is an old Indian remedy for diabetes. What many people don't know is diabetes is not an old Indian disease. Okay. Diabetes, you can read the history of the emergence of diabetes in North America. And I heard this one thing, and I didn't believe it. I had to go to a medical library and look it up. The first 3 cases of diabetes on the Navajo reservation were found in the 1940s. Right. And they had Indian Health Service there all along, right? People didn't get diabetes before the 1940s there. And then now, of course, all across, and the same was true in Canada among Canadian First Nations people there. So this is, I won't go more into that. We'll go here. There are some studies. I collected all the published literature where they actually tested this. And the actual measurements of Devil's Club in traditional decoction. Devil's Club traditionally was prepared exactly like the lomatium. They would cook it in a big pot for hours. And they do. Now, I don't want to put this in the past. They do that, right? They have these great big pots. And then they have these jars of cork bottles of their prepared water decoction. And so they tested somebody. The one subject said, "Oh yeah, I take this." And this was in an era when they didn't have blood sugar meters, and you diagnosed diabetes symptomatically. So there was sugar in the urine, frequent urination, and sweats, cold sweats, and shakes, and things like that. And a person. This is not uncommon. If somebody has diabetes and doing that, their blood sugar might be 400 or 500 or 600, right? And so that's really, really diabetic, right? So this one guy was, he said that when he took, it helped his diabetes when he took lomatium. So they measured his blood sugar one day, and it was 600, right? And after a meal. And then, so he took, the next day he took it, and he didn't have the acute symptoms the next day, but his blood sugar was still 600. Right? So this is very, very well proven here. And there were several other studies, right, proven that it does not lower blood sugar, right? It does not correct diabetes. And I'll just share a personal experience to show my other side. I live in the Pacific Northwest, right? And I spent a lot of time alone with plants. And the one day I was, I didn't want much. I was just gonna take a little piece of a lateral root of the Opal Panax, right? I needed about 12 inches of it, and there was this whole hillside of it, and I was out there on a solo, and I went from plant to plant and asked permission, right? And I'm not fooling you. The first one said, "Well, no." And the second one said, "Here, yeah." And I heard the dictation inside my head. You can take this, but you have to, for the rest of your life, tell people that we don't work for diabetes, or otherwise people will come out here and strip mine our hillsides, right? Rather than give up Oreos, right? And this literally, I got this dictation. Yes, you have to tell people. So I'm fulfilling my duty. I'm telling you now. I want you to tell your students and tell them to tell their students. Opal Panax does not do anything for diabetes, and don't promote any kind of urban legend that's going to result in it being strip mined out of the forests over there. Okay. All right. Okay. And this is one of the Devil's Club has this self-limiting thing to it. One of its primary ethnobotanical uses is as an emetic, right? people need to do a purification. Maybe they've been living in the city for a while and have to come do a purification. They'll do a sweat. They'll sweat and they'll take a lot of Devil's Club until they vomit and empty their stomach and their bowels as part of a purification. So we had a group, I'm embarrassed. I can't remember her name. Her last name is Shaw. She's an herbalist. She wrote a master's thesis on Devil's Club, and but part of her thing, she took Devil's Club tea and passed it around to a group of people, and asked how they felt with it. And at about a half a cup of tea, people felt queasy, like they wanted to vomit. Right. So this is. Tell people, oh, no, Devil's Club isn't any good for diabetes, but it might make you puke, right? Okay, so, which is true. Okay. We have some pearls there. You don't need a lot. It's a very useful relaxant expectorant, right? And it was primarily used as a respiratory herb, one of its uses, besides purification and laxative. And also, we have we said this whole category of herbs. You could probably Google my name and then spiritual heart, and you'll find on the internet an article, Herbs for the Spiritual Heart. There's this whole center. This is used in the Unani medicine, Greek Arabic medicine, the Chinese medicine, the heart, the seat of consciousness is the heart. So they will have, if the heart mind is agitated, they'll say, oh, you have heart disease. Right? Avicenna said, oh, if you're eaten up with rancor and revenge, you have heart disease. He doesn't mention angina pain or heart attacks. He says, grudge and the desire for revenge is heart disease, right? And we have herbs for that. Right. So we have herbs. We did a lot of work at our school on Western herbs, working with this aspect. And Devil's Club is one of the finest ones. We call it wakens up the spiritual heart protector. Right. You could take 3 to 6 drops and people will feel, right. I have that. We had a formula with that in it. I said, one of our students, she was going to break up with her distant boyfriend. Right. And she was very shy person, right? And not a super assertive, extroverted kind of person. And she said, oh my gosh, he's going to manipulate me, right? So I need to take some of these heart protector herbs in order to protect myself. And she was thinking, oh, this will put my boundaries up like that. So she was very, very shocked on the phone call that she started reciting to him everything he had ever done to her and why she would never be involved with it anymore after that, right? And from the protected heart space, she could speak her heart truth, right? And so this is a key herb for that kind of action. I encourage you all, if you have some, you get a tincture of Devil's Club, respectful, and but you can try that. And this is useful for your patients, useful for traumatized patients, shock patients. It's useful in an interview, right? When the person is a little shaky and off their heart center while they're talking a story or something, we like to give right in the interview. You can give a flower essence. You can give some spiritual heart herbs, and it helps with the relation. It helps the person settle down and tell their truth on that. Okay. How's that for a pearl? That's a pearl. Yeah. Do we have a need for that in modern practice? Oh my gosh. Yeah. We're a civilization of children who have stayed up past their bedtime, right? And eaten too much sugar. So, okay. Lobelia. Our urban legend about lobelia is that lobelia is toxic, right? Lobelia, you couldn't kill somebody with lobelia, right? There are certain people with certain heart condition, like the heart is bradycardia, really slow heart. You don't want to take a relaxant if somebody's heart is too slow, right? Or if they're in congestive heart failure, right, and the edema is backing up in their lungs. No, you don't want to relax that person, right? So, but lobelia itself is not toxic. This was the mistake It's a common mistake. You say, well, lobelia is called Indian tobacco, and tobacco is toxic. And lobelia has some of this acridity that tobacco does. So therefore, you can kill somebody. They advise prisoners of war facing torture, right? If they can get a hold of a cigarette and make a tea out of a cigarette and drink it, they can commit suicide, right? This is very toxic. So they said, the regular doctors said lobelia is like tobacco, so therefore it's toxic. And they were trying to frame Samuel Thompson. The regular doctors tried to frame Samuel Thompson for a murder, saying he had killed somebody with lobelia. He had killed a patient with lobelia. By the way, if you want to read that entire story, you can go to one of my sites is called medherb.com. Medherb, like medical herbalism, medherb.com, and just search on lobelia. And in one issue, I did an array. There's about 4 or 5 articles there, including the whole history of how he was prosecuted. The whole trial was there. I actually got a copy of the trial transcript from the records at Massachusetts courthouse there, and to review it. But the whole story of that whole thing is there. I won't go into it here. The patient that he supposedly killed was in the hands of his allopathic doctor, who had bloodlet him, despite the fact that he probably had bacterial meningitis. And the guy died 24 hours in the hands of the allopathic doctor, so they accused Thompson of murdering him with lobelia. This is the birth of that urban legend. So, and this is the common thing. Lobelia alkaloids, right, bind to the same receptors that nicotine does. They're called nicotinic receptors. So therefore, right, this is a pathway. One of my students had a PhD in biochemistry and a PhD in pharmacology, and her husband had a PhD in biochemistry. And we were chatting together at a party one time about all the misinterpretations of science that herbalists make. And we invented the term out on a pathway, like out on a limb. Like there's this pathway on paper. So therefore, this herb does that, right? So this is out on a pathway. Lobelia binds to nicotinic receptors. So therefore, right, it's to poison. Or, this is the big one, so therefore, it'll help you stop smoking, right? Because it'll take the place of nicotine and bind to those receptors, right? Okay, the urban legend based on being out on a pathway, okay? By the way, I studied the literature toxicology. I got 8 different toxicology books from a medical library. Lobelia doesn't even appear anywhere in the table of contents or anywhere in the index of any of the standard books on plant toxicology. Right? And,
Paul, real quick, Heather and I were talking about this very thing last night, just more so not the receptors, but because it's probably only less than 5% that lobelia is even touching in those nicotinic receptors. But right, we want to help people with smoking cessation theoretically. But Heather was saying that more so just its action on smooth muscle tissue could have its place, maybe. But what do you think?
Well, it's also an expectorant. So when you quit smoking, you're having to remodel your whole respiratory lining, right? It can help with that, sure. Yeah. But I promise you, it does not reduce cravings. It doesn't reduce cravings. And I think here we have the, here you go. The FDA allowed over-the-counter lobeline sulfate to be sold as a stop smoking aid from the 1930s through the 1990s, right? On the basis that it bound to nicotinic receptors. The claims were then banned after several clinical trials show it had no effect on reducing cravings or any success at quitting. There's no difference than placebo there. So as a relaxant expectorant, it may help with cleanup and remodeling of the airway after quitting, right? So this is what I think you guys were talking about. And like many other amido expectorants, we have, there's this in Chinese medicine, they say the upward moving qi can be expectoration or vomiting, right? And so we have these herbs. Bloodroot is one, ipecac is one, and lobelia is one. We call them amido expectorants. You can take them to induce vomiting, but in low dose, they produce this upward moving pushing out the fluids, right? So it can be useful for that. We won't be able to cover all these slides today, but I'm gonna. You need to hear these stories because this is an important part of herbalism as anything else. Is I was writing that series of articles for the Medical Herbalism Journal, right? And I had written a book. I had written a book about ethnobotany and folk medicine, and where I contributed to a book. And I had included in that book lobelia as an expectorant, right? And they hired this PhD pharmacognosist to review the book. The publishers did, and reviewed it. And he X'd out my lobelia section. And he said, this is in everybody's book on toxicology. You can't post that for the general public. And I've written a bunch of books. My policy is if the editors can do what they want, right? As long as they maintain the truth of what I'm saying, and as long as it improves the writing, and as long as I get credit for the improved writing, and as long as I get paid, right? So that's you don't like your stuff being edited, but we'll do that. So this guy did that. I say, okay, but that's wrong, and I got a grudge against that guy, right? I got a grudge. His name was Era Derrosian, right? And they had him review the book because I'm not a doctor. And they wanted to call the book the Doctor's Book of Folk Medicine, right? So they had to have, and they had reviewed by Dr. Derrosian. That's why they had him do it. But I had a grudge. So it was a couple of years later, and I said, okay, I'm going to see if it is in every toxicology reference. And this was my motivation for doing this. And I'm telling you, I couldn't figure out how to get a trial transcript, right? So I actually joined a History of Medicine listserv, right? This is back in the 90s, to ask, how would I ever get a hold of this record from 1809, right? And a guy writes back in the morning, he says, I'm a lawyer in Boston, and I'm also a medical historian, and they keep those records right across the street from me. I'll get you a copy if you want. So I got a copy of the trial transcript, right? And then I also got many, many references, and I got what doses of lobelia were being used, right? And I calculated the dose of lobeline in the dose that Samuel Thompson supposedly killed somebody with, right? And so I had this chart with all these doses, and I didn't know what to do with it. And, what am I doing here? Like that. And I got exhausted one afternoon and laid down and took a nap. And I took this nap, and I lie down and I go into a dream, and there's this kind of wooded area in a dream, and I'm going to cry when I tell the story, right? And this little black squirrel-like figure looks at me and goes, follow me. And so I follow this thing hopping, and we come, and there's a wooden cabin in the woods, right? And I go there, and the door opens, and out the doorway comes Samuel Thompson. And he's got a halo. And I'm seeing Samuel Thompson on the other side, right? And he looks at me, smiles, he's really happy, and he holds out a day planner and opens up a blank day planner and holds it to me like this, right? And then I wake up and I go, well, what does that mean? And I go, oh, make a chart. And I made a chart, and I put all the doses there, right? And this makes me cry. The dose that he supposedly killed somebody with was the same dose that was approved for over-the-counter stop smoking aid by the FDA. Right? And I had poured myself into this, and help came from the other side, and I realized that for the first time in history, I had acquitted him. No one had ever proven that he didn't kill anybody with lobelia before. And also, we have this, our elders are here. They're aware of what we're doing, okay? That's why I'm telling you this. Michelle asked me to teach about urban legends and clinical pearls. I'm talking about more than that, right? I'm 75 years old. I'm not going to be around that much longer. I have to pass along every bit of power and wisdom that I can to your generation. Okay. All right. So they're there. They're here. William Cook is here, right? The physiomedicalists are here. The shamanic healers are here. Where your motivation, right, aligns with what their soul motivation was, and is, right? They will be there and they're helping you, right? Okay. We're not just isolated in this materialist world like that. There's help coming. Okay. Guidance. All right. Yeah. Lobelia is a powerful relaxant and antispasmodic to both smooth and skeletal muscle. Right? Powerful. This is a pearl, topical antispasmodic. Topical. You put it on the spasm, rub it in. Right? I first experienced this. A friend, an herbalist, she also ran a massage school. She called me one morning and said, "I need your help. Will you come over and help me?" And she had got a knot in her neck. You know, you'll get a subluxation out there, and it'll be like you have a painful golf ball over on one side of your neck. And she'd made an appointment with her chiropractor and said, "I'm afraid though, if he adjusts, it's really going to hurt." Right. And so she's an herbalist. "What do you have?" And she goes, "Da, da, da." She says, "Well, I have some lobelia infused oil over there." Now, I had never heard of lobelia infused oil, but she had it. And I said, "Well, let's try that." And I massaged that oil into that golf ball on her neck, right? Just like this. And in 10 or 15 seconds, that thing melted like a pat of butter on the sidewalk in July. It just melted under my fingers as I was rubbing the lobelia in. So subsequently, I went, "Oh, well, that's a common use," right? It's used in, physiomedicalists used it in liniments all the time. And we... for some years, I guess for 4 years at our school, we took students each year to rural Nicaragua. My spouse, Tanya Neubauer, is an ND herbalist, and she had worked for a year and a half in a clinic in rural Nicaragua, and so doing primary care medicine. So we took students down there, and we would always bring quarts of lobelia liniment, right? And this is rural farmers, right? And they're working in the subsistence agriculture, right? And oh my gosh, everybody there has body aches, and many people there have never had a massage in their life, right? And we would give them a massage. We'd rub the lobelia into there. That stuff would be gone in 24 hours. Lobelia liniment. It was so popular among. For relaxing musculoskeletal pain. That's a clinical pearl. And then what I do, you say, "Oh, now you have somebody comes, they have pain and spasm, and you don't happen to have some infused lobelia oil." I'm not sure that's even the best way to do it, but you could do a prepared liniment, but you don't have it. Okay. You get a little jar. I don't know if I have one here. I can show you. I have little 4-ounce jars, circular jars with a cap. And you put 10 drops of lobelia in there and a couple of tablespoons of olive oil, right, in there, and you shake it up like that. If you set it down, they'll separate, right? But no, shh, real quick before it separates, get it on your hands and rub it into the thing, and you just made a lobelia oil. Right? The oil will spread it out evenly over everything. And I'm just trying to think. The last time I did that, a woman had a rear-end car accident, minor rear-end car accident at lunch. She came in back to class and goes, "Oh, I got the smell of cookie." You took that and just massaged that into her neck, and you watched her just go, like that. Okay. Another one, okay, I haven't seen that more than once, so I'm not going to say that. Okay. Here, I don't know if you can get ephedra anymore, but equal parts of lobelia and ephedra sinensis those two, 6 to 8 drops, can take the edge off an acute asthma attack. This is seen repeatedly. Seventh Song, Michelle mentioned that Seventh Song has taught you guys before. Seventh Song actually taught me that I think. Yeah. Oh, no, I think he had massaging lobelia into the scalene muscles up here. For that. Oh, yeah, just backwind everything, and we're gonna go back and we'll edit that. No, I didn't say anything about that. Okay, because I'm getting confused here. All right.
So, Seven Song does teach lobelia for asthma attacks, definitely. So
Right.
you're clear on that. Yep.
He had said something about watching the person relax, and I don't remember whether it was from internal use of 6 or 8 drops or from massaging it in the front. That's what I don't remember. I don't want to misreport something that he said.
He does teach, internal use of lobelia too.
Yeah.
I learned it from him and have used it that way, definitely.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Yeah. Back on lobelia toxicity, I gave a lecture one time on the non-toxicity of lobelia. And to start the lecture in front of everybody, I took a teaspoon of the tincture, right? And I guess about 10 minutes in there, I said, maybe I shouldn't have done that. I just got really sort of disconnected from reality and feeling like I was going to die and like that. Okay, but I did finish the lecture, and I didn't puke. I didn't even get nauseated. So, okay. Ginkgo biloba, Herban Legend. It was proven definitively in clinical trials that ginkgo has no benefit on dementia, has no particular benefit on memory problems, right? I think I'm going to show you here. I understand it as very specialized cases, right? They call it the aging brain. The brain actually gets smaller, right? And then also you get accumulated little vascular events, right? That can lead to what's called vascular dementia, right? But you also just reduced circulation to the brain, to a smaller brain, right? Can cause depression and low-grade cognitive stuff. So when that's the case, ginkgo biloba can help that. Okay, it won't do anything for Alzheimer's disease. It's not going to do anything for dementia or anything like that. And and it doesn't have any effect on memory in an acute situation, right? People say, "Oh, ginkgo is good for memory." Okay, I'm gonna take an exam, so let me take a bunch of ginkgo so I'll remember my questions, right? There was a trial where they gave people very high doses of ginkgo and then gave them a learning task. And the people who had taken the ginkgo learned better than the people who took the placebo, right? And but you would have had to do it during the lecture, right? You would have had to do it while you were doing your homework, right? And also, it was very high doses there. Okay. This is, I'm going to do this because ginkgo is so well known. The ginkgo nut and seed and food is medicine in China. Right? And it's used as food and medicine. As food, it's cooked. You can go to a Chinese restaurant and get like ginkgo soup or something, ginkgo nut soup or something, but it's cooked. It's boiled. It doesn't have that. But it's used as, it's considered a harsh, semi-toxic herb, but it can be used like for asthma, for an acute emergency asthma attack. They can use it for that, the ginkgo nut, right? It stinks, right? It's really harsh, right? So, okay. Strong and toxic herb. The toxicity symptoms of ginkgo nut are severe headache and GI upset, right? Like heartburn and just GI upset and headache. The headache can be severe. It was never used in China for memory, right? Never, ever. The nut is the medicine. There's a book, the Barefoot Doctor's Manual, right, was a thing during the Maoist era where they were trying to train paraprofessionals to give rural health aid. And in there they said if you can't get the nut, you can use the leaf as a poor substitute, right, for what the nut does. Down here, this is recognized in the scientific literature, okay? There is a compound in ginkgo, and they name it ginkgo toxin. Right? That's right. Sometimes they don't know what it is, so they'll call it something like that, ginkgo toxin. It turns out that the ginkgo toxin, these are called thiaminase inhibitors, and they induce the equivalent of a thiamine deficiency by blocking your thiamine, your thiamine metabolism, right? In huge overdose, it can cause seizures, right? So okay, there was study in Japan and Europe starting in the 20s. They were studying flavonoid chemistry, and they found these unique flavonoids in ginkgo, right? The unique flavonoids in ginkgo make up less than 1%. I think it's 0.25 of 1% of the ginkgo leaf, but only in the fall when the leaf has changed color. Right? It's not there the rest of the year, right? So to make this, they study these flavonoids, and to make the medicine then, okay, well, they take the ginkgo leaf, they concentrate it 50 times in order to get these flavonoids, but they have to harvest it at exactly the right time, right? And then it turns out there's all this other stuff in the ginkgo leaf. So they have to remove the rest of the stuff so it doesn't give you a headache, right? And the GI upset, right? So collectively called ginkgo toxin. So now this is part of my personal history. I saw this happen. I remember when ginkgo became a thing. Ginkgo became a thing. I believe the year was 1986. It might have been 88. I think it was 86. And there was a French medical journal, La Presse Medicale, published a whole issue on ginkgo, right? We're going, wow, this is a medical journal. They're using an herb, right? And it said, this fills a niche in our healthcare, system that nothing, we don't have anything else for, like the aging brain, And it was big medical news. And it was all about this flavonoid extract, right? So the flavonoid extract, this is kind of like where the person introduced the Echinacea Herban Legend because they didn't actually read the German, right? And here a lot of people didn't actually read the French, right? In the French, it says, we prepare this with and with undesirable substances removed, right? So I witnessed this. This was the great ginkgo headache epidemic in 1986 and 1987 in the Pacific Northwest and elsewhere. And this is very common. You'll see this. Somebody says this herb is good for that. This is a Chinese herb that's, quote, good for that. This is something, quote, good for that. So therefore, okay, well, I'm going to go get some and throw it in some alcohol and make a tincture. Right? Well, maybe it was never used as a tincture, right? What? I mean, seriously. You have people doing mushroom tinctures today. Mushrooms have never been used traditionally as tinctures, right? They use the water extract of the fruiting body. That's all our traditional medicine, right? So now people, oh, well, I'll take the mycelium and make a tincture out of it. It's not going to do what the fruiting body does. They're completely different chemically, when they have that. So, and alcohol is different than water for extraction. So, anyway, so people did this. I was here in Portland. They actually hired somebody to go out and harvest ginkgo leaves as they were from the local parks. They were doing that in this company. They threw it in some alcohol and they made a tincture, right? And there's a couple of problems with that. It's not concentrated 50-1. That has 50 times too little flavonoids in it, and there's no undesirable substances removed, right? So that's the tinctures. But what's worse, two companies, they said, oh, this is a concentrated extract. So they hired people to go out and get ginkgo leaf, and they did their own concentrations. And one company was selling a 4-1 ginkgo concentrate, and one was selling an 8-1 ginkgo concentrate. And these created an epidemic of ginkgo headaches, hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of cases. And I was at the Naturopathic Medical College in Portland at the time, and the NDs were giving this to their parents. They were giving these products to their parents, right? And oh my God, were they pissed, right? And when they found out that this was of no benefit, right? No benefit for memory, but it was giving people headaches. And the one company that did the 8-1 extract, they later realized, their error, and they actually licensed a company from Europe to actually make the product properly and started selling it. And the head of the company, I heard his lecture. He says, "Oh yes, we have the proper European-made product. That 8-to-1 extract we used to sell produced headaches in about 50% of people who took it." Right, and this is like slaughter. Okay, so coming around to tinctures, right? This is this so many urban legends. You really have to think. Just because somebody takes a plant and throws it in a tincture doesn't mean you don't know the dose, right? You don't know maybe the proper alcohol. Maybe it has to be water-based and not alcohol. Maybe the alcohol will precipitate the things you need in it. So this is very common. A lot of the tinctures we get will not work for what they're supposed to do. In this particular case, ginkgo tinctures became popular. I taught at a school in Boulder during the 90s, and the herbalists the students there would take ginkgo before they take a test. They chow down on the thing. But whenever I would teach a class, whenever I do it, I teach a class on safety and side effects, and I always ask, who here has had a side effect of an herb, right? And I've been actually doing that since 1987, and collecting every case story of every side effect that I can. And so I stopped counting among those students at the 20th case of people who had induced headaches by taking ginkgo tincture, right? And subsequently, a lot of herbalists know that now. Herbalist Michael Moore. People know that our Southwest master. I say Michael is like for me, he's like one of the sacred mountains of the American Southwest. He's just a giant of what he's contributed to herbalism. And but his books, if you read his books, he has really nice analogies and nice quips. He is one of those who took an herb every day and doesn't talk about something till he's taken it. So he has language for things that we don't. So his language for the ginkgo headache, it was as if you'd been up all night partying on bufo toad toxin, right? And I'm guessing maybe he had some personal experience with that, but I don't know. But so this is your urban legend that it's good for memory, right? The clinical pearl is don't take the tincture, right? Now I had it may be useful to standardize extract. As the standardized extract may be useful for retinopathy, right? For poor circulation to the retina in people with terminal diabetes, right? And so there's that's one of the possible pearls there, right? Okay. But we have this for that. Ginkgo for memory. They actually did. What happened is it looked pretty good on the first published trials. This is one of the things with critical thinking. Scientific critical thinking is called selective publication. Somebody runs 10 trials and it works in 4 and it doesn't in 6. They're going to publish the 4 and they get into the literature. It's called selective publication, right? And I like to say that's the equivalent of flipping, doing a series of flipping coin 10 times. And only publishing the times when you got 7 heads and 3 tails, right? And you left the rest of them out. That's what the equivalent is. So that's what was done with ginkgo. The early trials on ginkgo all look really good. And the next one here is saw palmetto berry. So what I'm saying is true for both of them. The early trials looked really good, right? And then as soon as some time went on and some people not associated with the company that developed the product and other people, you start getting other clinical trials. You get up to there's a meta-analysis and you find, oh my gosh, they created $1 billion market with selective publication. But 15 years later on a meta-analysis, they say, it really doesn't work. That's
Paul, do you have to bounce out right at 2 or do you have one more time?
Let's see. Oh no, I can stay for another 20 minutes.
Okay.
Yeah.
Seeing if you could do echinacea, golden seal, cilantro, and maybe another.
Sure.
Okay.
Yeah, I appreciate your request there, Sarah. No, I'll just do the thing here. This is saw palmetto. is what they said. Cochrane meta-analysis. Seronorepens at double and triple doses did not improve urinary flow measures or prostate size in men with lower urinary tract symptoms consistent with BPH. This is, and this was, you read the old eclectic literature. Finley Ellingwood says, well, by itself, it isn't much benefit for the prostate, but you can include it, right? So this is about, the prostate herb, Herban Legend, right? Based on selected publication. So here, it does have its use. Okay, let's see. You had requested cilantro. Okay, I'm going to do this real quick. Cilantro supposedly detoxifies heavy metals. This is based on one study 20 years ago. This appeared in the Journal of Electroacupuncture. Okay, and a researcher testing himself using muscle testing, right, determined that he was toxic with mercury, right? And that then cilantro in his soup resulted in complete removal of mercury from his body. He did this. Do you know he used this sophisticated technique to measure mercury? It's called the bidigital O-ring test. Oh my God, that sounds authoritative. Bidigital, 2 fingers, O-ring. Pull them apart. If you can pull them apart or not, that's strong or weak muscle. It's a muscle testing technique. So this entered into urban legend field based on muscle testing 20 years ago.
Was it Dietrich Klinghardt?
No.
Dietrich has his own brand of genius, but he's got a lot of things to sell.
He is Dietrich. I know people have worked in his clinic. He's a dangerous man. He hurts people and charges them too much money.
A lot of money, yeah. But I know he's made popular the ART testing and things like that, and I know he's talked about cilantro. Yeah. So, every a few years I go look and I said, well, have they published anything yet? Where they measured somebody's mercury, gave them cilantro, and then measured it again and found it went down. Have they published it yet? I look every 2 or 3 or 4 years. No, last time I looked, still no. I've been looking for a long time. Okay, some people take coriander and they feel better. Yeah, it's bitter, aromatic, cool, dry, carminative. People can take a bitter carminative and feel better. Your digestive lifts up, your vital spirit lifts a little bit. So it doesn't mean you got rid of your mercury. Okay. Here, echinacea. Okay. Myths. Echinacea loses efficacy after 10 days. Not true. Okay. There was another clinical trial published in the same era that showed the women with chronic vaginal infection, they gave them echinacea daily for 6 weeks. And they measured their immune response. The immune response continued to increase for the whole 6 weeks when taking echinacea for that whole 6 weeks. Now, we can have a certain problem with doing that. Let's just say the person's vitamin D deficient. It's a common cause of immune deficiency, right? And they're getting 3 colds every year during vitamin D winter, right? Well, you can take the echinacea and play that little trick, but you haven't really solved the problem. In fact, you may drive the problem deeper, right, by doing that. But echinacea, I love Seven Song's statement. They say echinacea is a really, really useful herb despite its popularity. Okay? So, there you go. And I agree. So, okay. There's a pearl. This is the study here that led to the misinterpretation, right? You can see here, echinacea, short or long term. This is the phagocytosis. That's the percent. You put the white blood cells in with, say, some carbon powder and see how much carbon powder it eats. Like that, the phagocytosis. And this is the placebo. Phagocytosis kind of wandered around, as would be normal. Under echinacea, the phagocytosis increased way up, 6 times higher than it was with the placebo. And this is the use. Somebody's in an acute infection. Hey, that's great. You can take echinacea in an acute infection. It'll increase your white blood cell phagocytic activity. That's great. You know, it's main use. But then you see. Then, the phagocytosis drips back down to baseline here. Look at the bottom. See the arrows?
See that the little arrow says active or placebo, 3 times 30 drops per day. And it goes, they got a dose on day 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. They stopped giving the echinacea, right? It didn't lose its efficacy after 10 days. In fact, the phagocytosis continued above the placebo level till day 8 after giving it for 5 days, right? So, okay. So the lesson here isn't just how to use echinacea. The lesson is this is how urban legends are born, right? And you'll see this. I see this in magazine articles all over the place. I see it in textbooks, right? And it's just not true, right? Okay. Let me see. I'm going to get to the tea in a minute. This is when the Germans published a monograph on echinacea in the 80s, and they said, or early 90s, and they said, well, this shouldn't be used in autoimmune diseases, right? Autoimmune, where the connective tissue is involved, right? And immediately the whole herbal industry starts backlash. Oh, that's just theoretical. That's never been seen, right? Okay, and this is something to learn also. The same kind of backlash against the people who are injured by comfrey, that there is a knee-jerk reflex to people to defend our herbs from them, and we have the above all do no harm. It's the all is all important there, and I wrote a book about echinacea and golden seal in 1996. And in that, I discussed this issue, and I'm so glad that I wrote it right. I put it at the end because I interviewed somebody with systemic lupus, right? Who she was a naturopathic doctor. She could take echinacea when she had a cold, and it wouldn't aggravate her lupus, right? So I thought, okay, well, maybe you can use it like that. But the closing paragraph says, nevertheless, person should use caution before stimulating an immune system that is attacking your own symptoms. But we'd never seen a case. 3 months later, first case. A woman came to our clinic. She had ulcerative colitis. She decided to try echinacea and had the worst bloody diarrhea she'd ever had in her life. And then an herbalist, this is an herbalist, a famous herbalist now, but she had a sore throat, and she also had autoimmune kidney disease, right? And she took echinacea for the sore throat, and it caused her to go into the hospital and need to get dialysis from the attack on her kidney from taking the echinacea. This is the second case. This is all over about 3 or 4 months after my book came out. And then there was another case. It was on intake. I didn't give the person echinacea, but they said, oh yeah, when I tried echinacea, it caused this, right? So this would have been by 1998. I said, whoo, boy, I'm glad I put that little disclaimer in there. But subsequently there in my journal, when I hear another case, I'll publish it. And then I get correspondence. They say, oh yeah, we've seen that. We've seen that. And an herbalist from Britain was advised by the MetaHerb herbal company to give her son with an autoimmune disease high doses of echinacea to help clear the bacteria that was supposedly causing the autoimmune disease. And the kid ended up in the hospital, right? And so I collected reports. Now, the collected reports from herb-friendly medical herbalists, more than 30 cases of a wide variety of autoimmune diseases, which were aggravated. And we have some cases, maybe 7 or 8 of those are on rechallenge, right? It did it once, then it did it again. And one of them is 4 rechallenges. One of my lupus patients rechallenged herself 4 times, right? 3 times, 4 times total doses. And we got a flare very soon after taking the echinacea. You have to figure if acutely it's increasing phagocytosis, then it increases other things. Well, certain people, if the shotgun is aimed in the wrong direction and you pull the trigger, it's going to cause you a problem, right? So, okay. Let's see. Clinical pearls. You need to know about echinacea tea. Okay. Y'all ever heard of echinacea tea before? Tea? I get this. I have a colleague, it's Dr. Chris Detheridge. He's an ND herbalist, practices in rural Missouri in the Ozarks. Probably by now has 40 years of experience, but he does full-on acute primary care. He'll have somebody walk through the front door with a copperhead bite, all kinds of a woman with pelvic inflammatory disease, right, where infection has gone from the reproductive apparatus up into the peritoneal cavity. So he told me one time, he said, a woman, he had pelvic disease. I went over, I put 2 ounces of Echinacea angustifolia in a liter of water and decocted it for 40 minutes and had her drink the whole liter over the next 3 hours. And 2 or 3 hours later, her fever was gone and she was recovering. He told me this story. And then he says, oh, I've also used that for copperhead bite. I also used that for that. And I go, whoa, thanks, Chris. We're going to try that. So this was been around 2002. We started doing this in our school community. And you can do stuff with Echinacea tea that Echinacea tea would never, ever, ever, ever accomplish. It is really remarkable. I think of this as when I have the person who ought to go to the hospital, somebody who ought to take antibiotics or IV antibiotics, who is refusing. I think, okay, this is where we go, right? We're going to do this. And I've seen it. What do I have here? We've seen this in kidney infection, active kidney infection, copperhead bite, pelvic inflammatory disease, oral infection after surgery. Somebody had incision in their gums. You're going to get an infection after that, right? And after oral surgery. And then they refused antibiotics. I actually did this myself one time. And I take this tea, and the infection started, and it grew down a couple of teeth, and then started receding back, and then was gone. I didn't have to take antibiotics for that. So, okay, that's you'd have to see it to believe it. One man, one of my students had he had found a deer carcass and got one of the deer bones and was whittling on the deer bone, right, in order to make something. And he nicked his thumb. It was like not even an eighth of an inch little nick on the meat of his thumb like that. And he came to school the next day and he was a little bit feverish and was getting sick. And as he got corpse sickness, right? And as the sun was going down, you get afternoon, right? He was thinking he was relaxing, and a red streak started. And it looked like somebody had taken a red felt marker and was slowly moving it up his arm like this. And it went up some channel there, and over about 20 minutes, 25 minutes, it got all the way up to his armpit, right? Like that. And we're going, oh my God. And this guy is mentally off, right? He's mentally off. And but he said, no, I'm going to go home. And he said he stayed up all night long chewing on OSHA root to deal with that. He said he didn't sleep that night. He just chewed on OSHA root all night long. And then he came back to school the next day, and it was he was pretty sick. And my assistant, Sherry Hupfer's her name, she came in at noon. She goes, oh, and made him a tea of Echinacea, right? And he took it. Half an hour later, he got sleepy. He laid down and slept for an hour, and the red streak had receded. He was gone, and he was getting better. Okay? If you remember stories, any of my students that you meet will tell you that Paul tells a lot of stories. And sometimes he tells the same story over and over and over again, and da-da-da-da-da. And 10 years later, they go back and say, I never forgot that story, and it really helps me clinically when I remember that. So, okay, y'all remember that story? You can picture the red felt marker moving up the arm, Echinacea tea, right? The guy should have gone to the hospital. That was very, very serious. Hydrastis, this is the big one. Golden seal is not an antibiotic, right? It is not an antibiotic. You take it inside, it won't do anything to any germ in your body, right? It won't even kill your microbiome, right? There's not enough of it to actually mess with your microbiome. So it is antiseptic. If it comes in contact with bacteria, it's broad spectrum antiseptic. It's remarkable, absolutely remarkable for that. I had one of the first herbals of North American herbs that was written. The author's name was a botanist named Rafinesque, Rafinesque, and you can get his books. They were written in the late 1820s. You can get his books, free copies. You search the name. It's herbal. You can get both volumes for free on the internet, PDF versions there. But before they had the internet, yeah, I'm telling you how old I was. Before I am, I'll tell you the story. I graduated I got out of college with a science degree before the invention of the 10-function calculator, right? And we have to use slide rules and logarithms. Have you ever even heard of a slide rule or a logarithm? So anyway, this was back to find a book by Rafinesque back in the 80s. I had to go to Cincinnati, right, and visit Cincinnati, and the Lloyd Library there has all these old books in it. And I went there, and oh my gosh, I was the only person in the library, because most people aren't interested in a book library, but it's a repository of an incredible library thing. So I spent the first whole morning there reading through Rafinesque, right, and got to Hydrastis. He said, "Oh, this is called yellow puccoon," right, and it was noticed, says the white settlers were astonished that some of the Native Americans they'd been fighting with would have a wound, and they'd come back in a couple of days and there was no complication to the wound. And it was found that they were using yellow puccoon to disinfect their wounds, right? This guy Rafinesque, he rode the length of the Ohio Valley on a horse, going from Native American group to Native American group, right? Got down to the Mississippi and turned north, and went about a couple of 100 miles up the Mississippi River doing the same thing, collecting their herbal healing methods. So that's it. Anyway, that's it. Topical disinfectant. That's what it does. Okay. So, all right. The people think I need an antibiotic. They think I have a germ. I'm going to take something that's going to circulate in my blood and kill these germs wherever they are, right? The alkaloids in Hydrastis don't even enter the bloodstream, right? They don't. So this is, and in fact, there is a problem with that, is that Hydrastis, you could remove the alkaloids from Hydrastis and it's astringent. It's a powerful astringent, right? And remember the drip, drip, drip of the of the mucus that's like bathing your mucous membranes in mother's milk and giving you immunity. Hydrastis will dry that up, right? You take it acutely, right? The old adage in the old medical books was never until the fever's passed, never in the acute phase, never until when it's subacute or chronic. That's where you use Hydrastis for mucous membranes. So this is this urban legend started in the 80s. This idea of echinacea and Hydrastis as a magic bullet. It's sold all over at all the health food stores, at herb departments. This was based on the misinterpretation of antiseptic effect for systemic antibiotic effect. Okay. Pearls apply locally as a tea or a fluid extract. You can discolor the skin. Okay, as a spray on the throat. There's some German physiologists prove that if you gargle, whatever you gargle never reaches your actual throat. It just reaches your glottis. The glottis is the thing that goes blah, 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 like that. You're closing it. It doesn't actually touch the throat. You want to spray something on the throat. Okay, clinical pearl. Remember that for life. Spray stuff on the throat. Okay, little spray bottle. Okay. Spray on the throat, a nasal spray. This is, the little nasal bottle with a little nozzle. You go, you squeeze them up your nose, right? This is a formula there. Okay, here's a formula. You get a 2-ounce bottle. This is a clinical pearl, I promise you. 1 teaspoon of glycerin in there, not more. Okay. 15 drops of Hydrastis, 15 drops of myrrh tincture. Add water to make 2 ounces. Okay. That seems really, really diluted, right? Seems like too diluted. It's not. These things in the lab dish, the echinacea alkaloids, hydrastine and berberine and cannadine and those things, and then the myrrh resins and essential oils, they kill things at the level of parts per million, right? And you could dilute a hydrastis tincture 40 times and put it in a lab dish, and it would still kill microorganisms. So this is not to dilute. This is a clinical pearl. We've probably seen this correct. Person comes sinus infection. They're offered their fifth or their fourth or their third prescription of antibiotics, which previously made it go away a little bit, but it just comes back. Right? And it was discovered sometime there around in the 1990s. It was discovered that most chronic sinus infections have multiple bacteria in a biofilm that's interwoven with a fungal biofilm. And there's fungus in there. And that's why antibiotics don't work, right? Because you'll kill the bacteria component, but the fungal component is there. So when we found that, I started thinking, oh, I see. Well, we have lots of herbs that topically kill both bacteria and fungi, right? And by the way, this original formula is an eclectic formula that used 30 drops of Anamopsis. Right? It's just hard to get Anamopsis. It's Yerba Mansa, right? So this works just as well. Okay. And, okay. You just spray that 4 times a day up in there. And I've seen people within 3 or 4 days, a month's long chronic recurring sinus infection is gone. Clinical pearl, hydrastis. Dioscorea, wild yam, does not make hormones. I want to do this one. I'll show you the chart. They did this because the pharmaceutical industry was using a plant alkaloid, a plant steroid called diosgenin from wild yam. They were using that to manipulate and make progesterone out of. So this actually was the same person who introduced the echinacea's lost in 10 days clinical pearl, started broadcasting that wild yam has phytoprogesterones in it. Here, I'm going to show you how preposterous that is. This is the actual method of making progesterone from diosgenin. You see this down here? It says 200 degrees centigrade. Okay. They use that to break these outer parts off of the diosgenin, right? And then you see this HOAC. This is acid, by the way, and this is alkaline. Yeah, it goes through a high acid bath, a high alkaline bath. It's boiled at twice the boiling point of water, and then they do some things. And all they're doing, they're breaking some of these pieces off. They're keeping the structure, and then they're adding new tinker toy pieces on the top. Okay? So that's how they make progesterone. May I venture that doesn't happen in the human body? Okay. No. Most reliable antispasmodic for smooth muscle. I think everybody needs to have this. Okay. Now you had one more, didn't you, Michelle? No. Did you have a request for another herb?
How many others do you have?
Well, it's almost time for me to leave.
Sure.
But,
maybe shout one out. You pick.
Let me find one. This is more a clinical pearl. Juniper is pigeonholed as a kidney herb, right? This is not just a kidney herb, right? This is a really wonderful warming systemic alternative. It improves the appetite, it improves digestion, and it promotes detoxification through several pathways. It's almost a model of that. And so I could tell the one story about this. And also it doesn't irritate the kidneys. This is an urban legend based on the use of essential oil of another plant irritated kidneys. So somebody that got translated into juniper irritates the kidneys, right? And this will be the last story I'll tell. You've heard of Father Kneipp. Father Kneipp, the German nature cure. He was a priest, a Bavarian priest. The credit here goes to Mother Kneipp, because Mother Kneipp was one of the Bavarian village herbalists. Now, I don't know if she was an herbal specialist or if the average Bavarian villager woman was probably an herbalist, right? And so it's a community. The community of women are generally our predecessors for almost all herbalism. But so he learned at his mother's knee. He went on gathering herbs with her when he was a kid. He becomes famous for the water cure, nature cure. And his nature cure used dietetics and then hydrotherapy. And he became very famous. And literally hundreds of thousands of people traveled to Bavaria to take his cure, right? Including the people who founded the naturopathic medical profession in North America. The Henry Lindlar had a terminal disease. He went to Kneipp cured him. He had a born again experience, and born again in the Mother Nature experience, and the rest is history there. So Father Kneipp, they called him, his title, Chamberlain to the Pope. The Pope was sick, and they sent for Father Kneipp to come and cure the Pope at the Vatican in Rome, and then he went back. But he would put people on a diet, certain amount of fasting, when appropriate, in hydrotherapy. Hydrotherapy, not extensive, short courses of hydrotherapy twice a day, like 3 or 4 minutes, like twice a day, and bring people back to health. But he said, when I have a patient who's reluctant to take my cure, I give them a bag of juniper berries, okay? And I have them take, you'll never forget this story, you promise? Okay. I have them take 5 berries on the first day, and then 6 berries on the second day, then 7 berries on the third day, until they're taking 30 berries. And then I have them reduce 1 a day. And he said, by the end of that 2-month cycle, these patients are invariably so much improved in their health, right, that they invariably will come and take my complete cure. Right? So you think about what it is. It has bitters, right? And is carminative, right? It does promote elimination through the kidneys, right? But so it's going to have, because of the bitter, it's going to have some cholagogue effect, right? But it's a warming circulatory stimulant. And finally, we have this magical action. It's hard to put your finger on, but it's easy to experience. It's a vital stimulant. You take, I wrestled with the physiomedicalist literature for 10 years, right? Where they were talking about, well, this is a stimulant, and this herb is stimulant and relaxant. And I go, oh my God, what planet are these guys on, right? And after about 10 years, I got a list of their stimulants, right? And started taking that. And some of them were bitter, some of them were spicy, they're all different things. And just said, well, let me sample them, sample each one, and go, whoa, boy, well, that one makes me feel more alive, right? Oh, hold this in my mouth. Oh, that one makes me feel more alive, right? And I go, oh, this was the last generation of doctors who actually took their herbs, right? And this is my threshold experience, why I make all my students take their herbs, right? So they experience this idea of vital stimulation. You can't know about it intellectually. Like talking about the vital force is like trying to talk about love, you know? What do you love me? What do you mean? Well, you're in trouble now. Right? No, hey, love. How do you talk about love? You have to talk about love in terms of poetry or stories or something. So you have to talk about life like that. There isn't good language for it because it's not of the verbal center. So there are herbs you take, and you are more alive. You feel your mucous membranes are more alive. Your surfaces. Juniper is one of our fine vital stimulants, and it has all these other things there. So that's correcting this idea of pigeonholing it as a diuretic, kidney disinfectant. It's also a good disinfectant when somebody has a bladder infection. So,
do you think that it's always safe if someone has the beginning stages of kidney disease? That tends to be the thing that people bring up.
The old books that you have really, really good caution, Michelle, and I salute that in you. And that's the appropriate question. The old books say not where there's a lot of heat and inflammation, which makes sense. Mm-hmm. A lot of acute inflammation. However, we have Eric. You know the name Eric Yarnell. Eric Yarnell. You can Google him. There's lots of free articles by him. He's a naturopathic doctor and high-level master herbalist, right? And but a specialist in urinary tract. He's written a textbook on naturopathic urology, a textbook on the prostate, right? That thick textbook on that. And he has by now 30 years of experience working with urinary tract conditions, and he said there's no contraindication for juniper. I'll still be cautious on the old books. I want the juniper for the kidney tract. When there's bacteria there, I want it to help disinfect. That's when I want it there.
And probably better than Uva ursi?
No, both together.
Together? Synergize each other?
Uva ursi kills the bacteria one way and juniper kills them another.
Yeah.
And then the third one you put there, this is clinical pearl, add echinacea.
Yeah.
So then you get two different antimicrobials on the surface, and then you have the enhanced immunity from the system side.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. We've seen months-long urinary tract things cured in 3 days with that triplet. And you can modify the formula with a few other herbs for that. Michelle and Heather, it was nice to meet you. And
Laura's my co-host, and Heather is
Laura. Okay.
Jumped on as the maybe herbalist moderator. Yeah.
Okay.
It's
Laura, nice to meet you.
It's horizontal. We're all
Paul.
yeah.
I was watching people's body language responding to what I say, and you were quite animated when I said certain things, and I appreciated the feedback. So.
It's good for the teacher to know someone's here, but I think everyone's listening really intently. This was awesome.
Okay.
Yeah, particularly loved the Samuel Thompson story of
yes.
Yeah, I don't usually talk about that stuff, but it's coming through today. So there you go.
It came through for a reason. We loved it, and the Devil's Club experience, and just don't eat Oreos. Yeah.
Okay, so invite invite me back someday.
I will.
All right.
Right.
Thanks. Bye-bye.
Take care.
Thanks again.
Thanks, Paul.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Looks like I can't close my window here.
Paul, make me a host first before you go, or it'll kick us all off.
I'm having trouble with I see. I have to stop the share. I didn't realize I was.
Yes, stop the share, but make me a host, or we all go down.
Okay, let me see here. Ouch! Just a minute. Participants. How do I make?
I think you click on the 3 little dots.
There it is. Okay. Yes. You should have it back, Michelle.
Yep.
Please come back. We need the rest of that talk.
Okay. Or other things too. Okay.
An endless well, right? An endless well.
Okay. All right.
And just so nice to meet you.
Thank you so much, Paul. It's been an honor.
Bye-bye. Bye.
Take care.
Bye.
Changes I think I asked that class from him because I feel like you get those things out of the way, and it can change your whole kind of feelings about 15 of those, and also all that kind of continuum of critical thinking at the beginning. Yeah, Culpeper was a great herbalist, but like all of his 12 kids died or whatever because of the times, so what do y'all think? Jump in and talk. We can all talk together. I don't hear anybody. Everybody. Heather, Laura. Hey, Catherine.
I'm Kat.
Well, I guess I'll say something because I'm not sure everybody's backgrounds, but I actually would be more of like on the client participant side than like ever. The few times I've tried to I don't know, I'm just not really that in that realm. So it was really interesting for me, writing a few notes to be like, oh, I want to think about that more, like things that I've heard from people that I've gone to who are practitioners. I don't know, connecting the dots and just it felt like sitting in on a lecture of a class that I don't actually take, but I'm like, ooh, I know these words for the most part. So from that perspective, there was only a few things that I was like, oh, I think there's parts of this that are going over my head, or I would get deeper if I actually knew the like jargon or whatever. But for the most part, like I just feel brimming with like that sort of like stimulated, oh, I learned something new and I want to like read more and I want to think more about it. Just to start the discussion off.
I think one of the big parts of the lessons in the beginning too about critically thinking is think critically even about all that information too. But you're the seventh direction. He was talking about the 4 directions. You know, there's a 5th, 6th, and 7th. The 5th being looking downward, looking upward, the transcendental, the kind of spiritual dimensions of herbalism. But the 7th direction is you know, and you being the synthesizer for all of those other directions. So, yeah. But yeah, I think there's great significance of 50 years of practice and what you see working and, so to speak, working, not working, you know. So, language is
stories
tricky.
Were great. Oh, yeah. Sorry.
The language is tricky too. Work, you know, herbs work, you know, goofy ass Dr. Fauci. Don't take herbs for SARS-CoV-2. You know, herbs don't work. You know, it's kind of the same way of saying scrambled eggs work or don't work. You know, like,
yeah.
Someone who has coronary artery disease should probably be avoiding that scrambled eggs because it's just going to contribute to the accumulation of the cholesterol. It's blocking coronary artery.
They work to make you like. They work to feed you. You know, I mean, just to to have a little language discussion with you. Yeah. If we're gonna be critical about the word work, you know, it's like what do we mean by work? So
yeah,
well, scrambled eggs don't work. Scrambled eggs will be
they don't work for everyone.
Yeah, they're going to work for someone who is training for a marathon and can run. What is it, 27 miles or something ridiculous like that?
I think 27.
You know, that person needs that protein and those good fats and whatnot. But scrambled eggs don't work for somebody who has, you know, a dangerous level of cholesterol that's accumulating up in the coronary arteries. So,
that's really on the nose of like what I'm thinking about, because me and my partner both have very different neurological things going on. I have epilepsy and he has multiple sclerosis. So like both intense like whatever word you want to use, but like, yeah. And every time I want to talk to it, like he just had a seizure this weekend. And it was very interesting to like have my own like epilepsy knowledge come up and be like, okay, this is what I got to do. But also you have MS. I don't deal with that. Like, do we have to make sure, let's talk to a neurologist? Like, how do we, and it's, sorry, I'm just like speaking from the hip here, but it's making me think of all those differences. And like, when he was first diagnosed, I like, yeah, that's why I said I've never really worked, because I tried to be like, hey, do you want to like, let's look things up and let's look up stuff that would like naturally help, because that's sort of the background I'm coming from. And he's coming from a hard engineering background of like, no herbs unless you have a DR PhD doctorate in medicine. I don't want to talk to you about my health. And I was like, oh, I have to. That was such a learning curve for me, coming from communities that could be a little too far on the opposite side of the spectrum of like, never talk to a doctor, only take things yourself.
I think I don't know if I brought it up this weekend yet. I've had that conversation of that, take this herb or these herbs and you'll never get SARS-CoV-2 or you'll never get cancer. And then Dr. Fauci who says don't take herbs. You know, it's a very American thing to not be in the middle. And I've had this conversation with my rheumatologist, my primary care doctor, and a random fellow I met who's a medical doctor who's practicing in Nigeria. And, you know, his perspective too in Nigeria. It's not alternative medicine. Heather, what was the constituent? Starts with a Q, anti-malarial.
Oh, quinine.
Quinine. They're just
alone. However, people talked about it.
Yeah. The local peoples are they're taking that out of trees and they're decocting that themselves and they're using it for malaria. So it's an American situation, I think. Lack of critical thinking, but also ideology that just veers too far in any one direction. And from the lips of my own primary care doctor, so very thick. He's from India, and he's like, I'm not going to imitate his accent, but he's like, yeah, we're all screwed if we go too far in any direction, And it's you find that a lot, I think not trusting modern medicine, should not trust the system, but I think most of the technology that's available to us now, like that Culpeper story, he was losing all those children to tuberculosis because antibiotics hadn't been developed yet too. So medical technology is remarkable. We need to, in my opinion, integrate it and not get too ideological. And I think most of the people who are actually in the system in modern medicine are good people. They're caught up in a nightmare of power that's up above them. And it reflects in their everyday life and the cycles that they're caught up in. I think the most common thing most all of us probably feel is that we're not really listened to by practitioners, medical doctors. They have on average 7 to 12 minutes with us. We report what has gone on with us. We're a good witness to that. We got a lot to report by being in our own bodies. And they're making thousands of logical decisions within that 7 to 12 minutes, So I think it's more so the system. And does this all make sense? Anybody have?
Yeah, I just want to chime in and talk about how I loved and what Kat's kind of bringing up within Paul's talk is just the notion of semantics and like how we're defining the terminology surrounding all of this. And it is a dialogue between these 2 points in a system, to bring up the cybernetics ideal again. And so we do have like traditional Western science, which on an anecdotal point, like I was raised by doctors and I was supposed to become a doctor, but my rebellion was going into this kind of more, I still work in science sometimes, but definitely like my path with the plants is way more spiritual and it's way more anecdotally informed. And I love hearing all the stories from Paul about, especially in the 70s and 80s, when the movement of herbalism within the Anglo hippie world, as he says, is it's like first rearing its head and trying to prove itself. And now it's exploding. And so the information then goes through this sort of like it gets proliferated in all the wrong ways, and it has to do with the semantics, and it has to do with people trying to prove themselves to this Western healthcare system that's very authoritative. And yeah, I just I'm losing my track, but I love all of Paul's stories about I think it was a kinesiologist proving an herb by digital O-ring technique, and
it's the same principle of the goofy,
like insane terminology that people come up with. That's really, and it's just in the effort to make things sound scientific, which the reality is that like in my Terence McKenna mention, or the Wade Davis book, and they're talking about the Ingona tribe having real communication with the plant. And also Paul brought up his communication with, I forget what it was
Devil's
that
Club?
he was. Yeah, and the Devil's Club, they were like, the first one he sees is like, no, I'm not talking to you today. And the second one, loud and clear, was like, well, okay, but here's what you have to do in order, like, please share my story. And so then there was Paul sharing with us today. But I just love all those little stories peppered in, because it tells just the history of this bipolar ideal surrounding herbalism, or just like treating our bodies in a way. I have an we don't really use the term ethnobotany anymore, but I have a folklore PhD friend who studies botanicals, and she and I have gone down really long rabbit holes in certain conversations just on the fact, or just kind of philosophically trying to understand how are these things curing us? Like, what is the source of all of this? And what, I think that's what this whole conversation comes down to. Like, what is actually happening? Is this me? Is this placebo? Or like, does this plant actually have an effect on me? And there's no, like, the best way we can tell is these clinical studies, which the cold hard truth is that there's not enough done, like, in the sort of herbal clinical way. But there is all of, like, Paul's experience with proving his students' clinical findings. That's, like, to me, a trove of the proving is where the meat of that, like, internal experience lies. And so Alex, you brought up that, like, oh, I don't know all these I don't know all these terms, but I have the experience. And I just wanted to mention that, like, that's how I learned most of what I learned. And I'm also fumbling through, like, I curated a whole wellness aisle for a year, and it was so hard. Like, I just have to bring this talk in because it was really hard to navigate the misinformation that I was being fed on a daily basis from reps, like constant barrage from reps and emails and marketing materials. And you want to believe that all of these things do these extraordinary things for us. And then, like, as somebody who's in the cockpit trying to curate all this stuff, then you want to try it all. And, like, then your kidneys are taxed or whatever, your liver. So you can't try it all. So we do really rely on each other's stories and experiences. And then, like, coupled with the science, which we have to have that critical lens. So I'm going off on a tangent.
It's okay. On matters of intuition, shout out Robin, who's a little across the room. Just like knowing you through Instagram, I feel like you're one of the, like, eyes open, heart open to the wild, the ecology out of anybody I know, I'd say. I see that channeled into me. So do you have anything to contribute?
Yeah. That was very sweet. Thank you so much for that. I definitely feel like I am not so much drawn towards the science of things, although I appreciate the science of things, and I'm more like led with my heart and, like, the spiritual, like, aspect of plants, and, like, who kind of reaches out and talks to me and stuff. But I guess what I'm kind of thinking the most about, besides how I was, like, literally sobbing during that dream story that Paul told, I don't know, I wasn't watching anyone else see if anyone else was crying, but I was fully sobbing.
I was crying quite hard. I had to walk out of the room and go tell my friend here that story because I knew that they would appreciate it. And also their kid they were just trying to give them some lobelia the other day. So, and I feel Paul had a big part maybe in getting lobelia to not be like illegal in America, because it's outlawed pretty much in a lot of European countries, or it's by prescription. Yeah, just in the same way that ginkgo is too. And he's talking about the misuse of ginkgo and what have you. So
yeah, and what I also wanted to say was thinking about like the lineage of how things are like learned, where like so many of those urban legends, like I learned from the person who like taught me the foundations of like herbalism, and like they learned it from, I think, like David Winston or someone, and like that kind of like path that like Paul was kind of talking about too, where it's like someone learns from someone, and like then it's like, oh, this is like trusted information, and I'm going to spread this now to all of the people I'm teaching, and kind of how that like muddies things so much.
Yeah, I know Winston. He's written some cool books. He's definitely he's smarty pants. I get the sense sometimes with him, it's like this is law.
Yes.
Also, I know he requires for his school that people have a bachelor's degree in biology, and I don't know. I think that's pretty silly. So very useful. We shouldn't be cynical about studying biology. I think it's very fun. I studied biology academically. I love it. But when my school opens in 2025, and two of you by chance end up being my students, no, I'm kidding. Last time I did this course, 3 or 4 of the people ended up becoming like really good friends of mine. I think one of the people doesn't like me, so hopefully this becomes the outcome, even though I kind of already know all of you. But yeah, so when I open my school in 2 years, no biology undergraduate requirement. So. Yeah.
So exciting.
Heather, I have to ask your opinion. We're just kind of free associating right now. I guess we'll get back on the train soon. Maybe take a break and continue up with folk method that Laura was doing yesterday, and then we'll do a little thing on measured medicine.
I wanted to chime in briefly to talk about the kind of like German herbal healthcare stuff that I've experienced. But I don't want to. There was something that you wanted to get to. I didn't mean to interrupt.
Oh, I just wanted to ask Heather. It's kind of a secret, but I trust everybody here. So I really want to call this forthcoming school the Midwest School of Botanical Medicine, because there isn't one of those. So do I just have to ask Michael Moore's wife in Seven's song if it's okay? Or do I just do it? What's your opinion? Yeah.
Unmuting. You could ask Seven Song and Michael Moore, but I also
Michael Moore's dad.
Michael Moore's wife. Yeah, I was correcting myself. Yeah, Donna. I'd say why not ask them, because I think that they both would give you their blessing.
I think so too.
Yeah. And I think I remember Seven Song mentioning either asking or not asking Michael Moore. He had studied with Michael Moore. So there's, but yeah, why not ask them? Then 2 more, people who know a lot of herb learners know that it's happening too. Yeah.
And I think that they would support it. So because we don't have a lot of herb schools in the Midwest too. So I gotta give it one. Yeah.
What better place to jump off with the 7 directions than the center of our map the way we're oriented on the map. But I do want to hear Kat's accounts of German preparations and things, because I know that they have more stringent standards and maybe studies, and yeah, I'm curious to hear about your experience in Europe.
Yeah, I mean, I should say I didn't get deep into it in the German. There's a kind of a whole Heilpraktiker world that you can really visit. I only kind of went on occasion, but I think what I noticed more was the kind of integration of some herbal stuff, but there was also a lot of dogma. I felt and even though a lot of the like physicians that I saw would have been relatively like herb aware, or might not have been, might have been inclined to, this kind of dichotomy that we have in America between like, oh, there's herbal medicine and then there's real medicine. Like that's not really the case in Germany, or at least not in such a direct way. But it doesn't stop the medical culture from being shitty. And I think that's kind of the part that's interesting to me. Like I'm really interested in like New Age movement in general, like just as a kind of historical period that we're still sort of in. And a lot of that stuff has origins in Germany. And it's also very closely linked to fascism and origins of fascism in Germany. So I think for me I guess when we talk about like, what's the sort of like ideal care scenario, how does it incorporate, herbs, or other types of things that our current system in America like doesn't really do. I think it's important to be quite careful and grounded in the kind of like ideology behind it. Basically it's like you can have herbs, but it doesn't solve dogma. It doesn't solve the very German sense of, oh well, there's a correct way to do something. It negates a lot of intuition, and to me that's I guess just because the herbs are more integrated doesn't mean that it's done well, I would say.
I know a little bit about the situation in Europe. Kind of how the law exists there is a strange thing, country to country. Like in Finland and Germany, there's like 250 or so like off limits botanicals. You can't, like, you can get them on shelves here in America. You can't get them there. But then it's weird, like in Switzerland, and also in Germany, in medical training for, most every physician, they have to spend at least a semester learning botanical medicine. And in Switzerland, I know they see it's very much the case that it's a birthright of every citizen to be able to use herbs and things. So it's a strange thing from country to country in Europe, and I don't quite know why.
It seems like the theme of Paul's talk and our conversation is that there are many, many flavors of sort of authoritarianism.
Yes.
And one of the things I've experienced with people, learning I'm an herbalist and talking to me, whether that's a short or long time, but especially if it's a short interaction, is so many people are so quickly influenced by any sort of authoritative presentation of information, and so there's a lot of reining in of these myths, and also some things that someone may demystify or demythify. There could be still some rationale for part of that. It's not a either or, this person's right or wrong. I often say, like, we can't totally know that, but also it can be kind of scary, easy and quick to get someone to sort of come around on an idea that they've heard, which is maybe just, the critical thinking conversation. And I like that Paul pitched critical thinking in an inward way, because I think nowadays, and with, a lot of time spent on social media, a lot of time spent polarized, for many, critical thinking, people think they're applying it as a combative exercise, but yeah, go within too. So I thought Paul's conversation, our conversation, was amazing. I was quiet at first just to make way for others, but that's my little wrap up personally.
Well, thank you for coming.
Yeah. What are you guys doing next?
Oh no, I was shouting out to
Robin.
No, I think Robin's staying with us. There's just a cat on the screen.
Oh yeah, hi cat. This is Steph. Sorry.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah.
I think Michelle was talking to me
I
because I
was.
have to go.
Yes.
But this was really special, and I love hearing everybody talk about I don't know, just everything that you guys are talking about. It's really important conversations. And for some of you who weren't here before, I study Chinese herbalism and like acupuncture and stuff, and the way it's taught is very weird and jarring. And just to like echo what some of you were saying about like needing biology degrees for some of these schools, and like sometimes I come across like people, graduates of this school who don't like seem to actually know anything or like don't pay attention enough to like. It's just the whole thing.
It's something I've been very observant with. Sometimes doing the intake. I'm not going to name the school, but the other school in Chicago. Particularly people who've gone through the program who are of European ancestry. Like it's a weird thing. Like you can tell that they have this whole body of knowledge that was just put into them, but their way of speaking with the lexicon of TCM, a lot of times they don't feel comfortable in it. I sense a great unease because it's been like many years of rote learning, you know?
It's a weird, like, if it's not something that you grew up with and like in your culture, it can be weird to like, or like you don't even realize that the way you're talking about it is like off-putting. I have this one, my herbs teacher right now. She's really nice. She's very interesting. I get a lot of industry teas from her because she worked for Camwo, which is like a big company based out of New York that makes like PCM herbs of all varieties, right? But she brought up, she vaguely brought up it, like the British colonial rule in Southeast Asia, and like she couldn't use those words, and she kind of like stumbled over it. And I was just like, it's okay. It was colonization. We can talk about it. No one's gonna get mad at you or cancel you. Like we have to have these conversations about how this medicine came to be in this way, and you just have to like kind of be okay with that. I don't know. I have a lot of issues with the way that these things are taught in these like formal schools, because it kind of lacks respect in a lot of ways. And I just don't like people like kind of rush through these programs, or like will like be doing like the way the board. I'm sorry, I'm like stumbling over my words, but the like board exams for herbology, for example, it's not really as in depth as you'd think. And well, let me backtrack here. Basically, what I'm trying to say is that people don't pay respect to these herbs in ways that I wish they would. They don't see them as like their own spirit beings. And like, yes, there's all this like really cool like chemistry and like biological stuff going on, but you don't need to fully understand all of that to like trust thousands of years of knowledge of people trying and like refining their formulas, you know. And the way that Chinese think about like Chinese medicine practitioners usually, and especially Chinese people and people in Asia, like they integrate knowledge as they come across it. They don't do what like Westerners do, where they're like, well, this disproves that, so that's in the trash now, you know?
Yeah.
And so it's very interesting and kind of heartbreaking, like watching everything unfold, especially when there's like these white teachers who can't like talk about uncomfortable things. And then there's these other like amazing elders also that teach in this program who correct the books. And that's like, those are kind of pearls, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
So this event was really special to me, and I look forward to the things that y'all organize in the future. And I didn't know you were going to start a school. I'm very interested in that because after
I've got 3 students. I've got 3 students, 3 tentative students. That's all I need. I need 3 students and 10 philanthropists. Each philanthropist giving me like $30,000, and then that's good.
Ooh.
Yeah.
Okay.
So,
well,
yeah.
hey, when I'm done with this school, I would love to learn more like Western herbalism or whatever. Like I want to expand my scope of herbs because right now I'm just working on the Chinese way of doing it. So I would love to learn more about it.
And I think that distinction that people make oftentimes, Western herbalism, TCM, Ayurvedic, it's different languages, different systems. At the end, it's still kind of the same. I'm very comfortable in Western physiology, and I've always, it's a little cultural appropriation thing. I also feel when I'm in that clinic at that other school, it's extremely condescending, demeaning when they're using, stagnant chi, liver, and I understand that stuff. But it's just kind of like, talk to me as someone who knows this. And it's typically the people of European variety through that program, but they just feel uncomfortable in it and they feel stuck. It's just rote memorization. The school you're at, I feel is more so, and I know a lot of alumni out of that school is better than the other college. And I also don't want to knock the other college because I've gotten a lot of $5 acupuncture from the students and a lot of talented people there and good teachers and everything like that. So, but it's I don't know what's going on in the Midwest. Things are just it's so beautiful up here too. I don't know what's going on. I just say that you go to Asheville, North Carolina, or you go to the greater Bay Area, you go to Portland, parts of New York. Half the people you meet on the street would probably say that they're herbalists. In Chicago, when I say that to people, there's just like a look of concern in people's eyes.
Yeah.
I have an old time friend. I told him that, and he asked me what medicinal herbalism was.
Carolina. Yeah. Is it Carolina or Carolina?
It's Carolina.
I wanted to ask about what specifically are those nodes of like uncomfortable like cultural lost in translationness, because I'm thinking about, does it have to do with like the 5 element principles and the I just remember when first learning about TCM, it was like trips to Chinatown in Chicago and being like looking at a bag of tea and being like, oh, this like just kind of reading the labels that say like for someone with too much air, and kind of giggling about it in my naive young way with my college friends or something. That means, what do they mean by air there? And I'm wondering if that has to do, if that kind of lexicon of like moving through the elements has to do with where is the lost in translationness tend to lie?
Well, I think it's less about like those literal translations, because I think what they mean by air is probably wind. I'm trying to gather my thoughts.
Because for anyone who's not familiar with TCM, there's like the 5 elements are often described as a way kind of akin to the Ayurvedic constitutions with dosha, pitta, kapha. We have in TCM, there's earth, air, water, wood, and metal. Am I correct?
Yep.
Okay.
Yeah. So I guess what I'm talking about is more about the way that people like I've had teachers who I feel like they don't have like a connection to the medicine in a way, and like in that they kind of like will put it down, will be like, this supposedly does this, but there's no scientific proof to that. Or like I've had teachers who just kind of like read off PowerPoints and I try to engage with them. Like, for example, there's a cooling heat category in the materia medica, and they're the two only natural blue dyes that like are widely used are in that category. It's indigo and woad. They're both in that category. So I was just like trying to talk to him about that, and he like didn't like understand and kind of just talked down to me about it. It's like, I think you mean indigo, and he like just wasn't listening. And then just like, you don't care to know like the full story of some of these plants. Like, you don't care to know the cultural significance to some of them. I like had to like in the materia medica, there's also like it includes rocks and shells and animal parts and horns. And we recently learned about chicken gizzards, and I had to like explain to the teacher, like, yeah, like people just eat chicken gizzards out here. Like it's a thing. It's not that weird. And it's just like this cultural disconnect where like they don't realize that the way they're talking about it is like exotifying it, and not just being like, you know, people just, these horns work for this reason. This is why they use it. You know, I don't know if that answers your question.
No, definitely. So it's more just from just like cultural historic standpoint with the specific herbs and things.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
I have to let
Thanks.
everyone
I don't
know
know
that
if you're what's that?
Laura and I are both, well, I'm a Libra, Laura's a Scorpio, but we both have Pisces moons. So we have huge imaginations. We jump off the train, we smell the flowers, blah, blah, blah. Heather, what's your solar sign? I can't hear you.
I said, "Oh, I don't even know or remember. I'm about to be kicked off the Zoom. I'm a Sagittarius. That's all I could tell you."
Well, that makes sense, yeah. But I like that kind of direction. So, like, what's next, y'all? Where are you going? You've kind of gone in this...
Like the archer. Yeah, that's the archer, and looking to the future before doing the thing you're supposed to do right now is the part of Sagittarius I do relate to and believe in. Believe in as in like, oh yeah, that checks out. Yeah.
I feel like this is a good room of 9 people who are very kind and want to think critically. Yeah. So, and I think that's if you were to like do a little PCR test of Paul's talk there, it's never stop. You know, like that's the test positive is like never quit on that synthesis of those directions and thinking critically, thinking for yourself, you know. So, yeah. Okay. Oh, what should we do? 3 o'clock break. Get back to measured medicine and folk method, and maybe then we'll all kind of watch Melissa's video. We were gonna play it last night. For context, I think we'll link you all to it, and then listen to it with headphones. And Laura, maybe if you're okay with this, kind of reading like some of the bulleted points that Melissa didn't cross out to us. Does that sound good?
Sure.
Okay, because what we were going to do last night was following Heather's amazing masterclass in phytochemistry, then go up to looking upward, the transcendental, the metaphysical, into the very magical dimensions. And Laura's friend Melissa, who I don't really know, wrote this really nice thing and then recorded a video. The only kind of thing about it is the audio is not so easy to hear. So, yeah, should we do that when we come back from break? And then we'll get back into the folk method versus measured medicine. Is that cool with everybody? We won't get to a lot of things that I have planned for this weekend, but that's just kind of how time goes. It's the Pisces moon business. So I'm probably going to do a lot of these, re-record some of these to then put all up in line. That'll be available for all of you. So I'm thinking maybe I'll do, for 8 o'clock tonight, a little section on the perfect flower. I'll kind of watch an old video of myself with that, reading that from 2 years ago. Then I'm about to into this other herbalist, and actually much more formed 130-page thing that I'll just kind of go through real quick that I really like about herbs for the queers, the perfect flower. And I'll do little fast track integrated physiology. And Heather, if you're hanging around long enough, maybe we can bounce some materia medica through with that. Because I haven't really made a materia medica for the integrated physiology. I'd really like to, but so does that sound good to everybody?
Would it be okay to start with integrated physiology? Would that be a weird?
I just kind of want to continue the where we were at with the folk method versus measured medicine, if that's okay.
Yeah, because we cut it up in the middle.
When we return, is it okay if we do Melissa's video?
Sure, yeah, and to give everyone a little background, Melissa Damashevskis is a folklorist who's from Chicago and based in Northern California in Guerneville, which is Sonoma County near the Russian River. And she has like a pretty significant arts practice that centers around folk magic. And she incorporates a lot of different traditions and develops her own traditions. So she's going to talk about notions of coming up with your own, if that's something you're interested in. And yeah, that's all I have to say. I guess we can depart.
Well, before, do you all hear the echo? Before we depart, I wanted to read this to Paul, but I could tell he had to get going. He's got a 10-year-old. It's right about that, having a child. He wrote this song, and I like came upon it on YouTube. He's sitting right next to Seven Song at some conference like 12 years ago. And I found it probably like 7 or 8 years ago, something like that. And I wrote it down, but I did a different version. So it's like a remix on the song. I'm not going to sing it. I'm just going to say it. But you can look up on YouTube Paul playing guitar or singing this song. I think it's just called the Herban Legend. Yeah. So the words, and I've changed it a little bit. It's like my remix. But the words are, yes, I'm a herbal rebel. Yes, that's just who I am. For hard-reach licenses of medical practice, I do not give many damns. I give out teas and tinctures. I give out powders too. Such simple things, I don't need a license.
I will lie to you.
For the kind things I do. I give out flowers of calendula and roots of sassafras. Some bureaucrat don't like that. Let him stick some up his ass. And for those stiffs who say prune juice has no effect at all, I'd like to have them drink some and lock them in the hall. It's 300,000 each year now that they kill. They get in with their poor listening. They get in with their rich pills. I ain't killed nobody, and I hope I never will. This part's good. It's about going to jail for practicing medicine without a license. If they lock me in a jailhouse, I'll help those inside and leave when I'm done. If they don't want my love and care, I'll ride off into the sun. I'll head off to some new region and be just who I am. Go into the fields and woods, smiling like a clam. Yeah, I think the theme of that is that, we're born into this system. And